The contract sat between them like a death sentence. Lydia Harrow's hands trembled as she stared at the ink-black letters. Her name, his terms, her entire future reduced to signatures and stipulations. Across the mahogany desk, Duke Rowan Ashford watched her with eyes cold as January frost, waiting for her surrender. Outside, rain hammered London's streets. Inside, the silence was suffocating. "Sign it," he said. Not a request. A command. She lifted the pen, hating him, hating herself more. This is where it began. A marriage bought with desperation, sealed with resentment, and bound by a bargain neither of them would escape. Stay until the end to see how a transaction became something neither of them expected. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that night, the kind that turned London's cobblestones into rivers and made even the bravest coachman curse. Lydia Harrow pressed her face against the carriage window, watching the city blur past, gas lamps swimming in the downpour, figures hunched beneath inadequate umbrellas, the whole world drowning. She felt like she was drowning too. "Miss Harrow!" Her father's voice cut through the drum of rain on the roof. "Sit properly." She turned from the window. Thomas Harrow looked smaller than she remembered, his collar too loose around his neck, his face carved hollow by months of sleepless nights. The man who'd once commanded drawing rooms with his laughter now couldn't meet his daughter's eyes. "Father, no." He held up a hand and she saw it shake. "We've discussed this. There's no other way." "There's always another way." "Not for us. Not anymore." The carriage lurched over a pothole, and Lydia grabbed the seat to steady herself. Through the rain-streaked window, she caught a glimpse of the Ashford townhouse looming ahead. 4 stories of Portland stone, windows blazing with light, a fortress in Mayfair that cost more to maintain for a month than her family had left in the world. Her stomach twisted. "He's a stranger," she said quietly. "He's a duke, and he's offering us a lifeline." "You mean he's buying me?" Thomas flinched. "Lydia, that's what this is. Don't dress it up as anything else." She looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw the defeat etched into every line of his face. 3 months ago, their solicitor had delivered the news. The investments were gone, the properties mortgaged beyond recovery, the family name worth less than the paper it was printed on. Bankruptcy, ruin, social death. Then the Duke's letter had arrived. "I know what I'm asking of you," Thomas said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I know it's not fair. If there were any other option, but there isn't." Lydia finished the sentence he couldn't. She reached across the narrow space between them and took his hand. It felt fragile, like holding a bird. "So I'll do it." The relief that flooded his face made her want to cry and scream in equal measure. The carriage stopped. A footman appeared with an umbrella, ushering them through the downpour to the townhouse entrance. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a butler so immaculate he looked carved from marble. "Miss Harrow? Mr. Harrow, His Grace is expecting you." Of course he was. The Duke of Ashford didn't wait for anyone. Inside, the house was oppressively grand. Black and white marble floors, a staircase that curved up into shadows, portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down from gilded frames. It smelled of beeswax and old money, the kind that had been accumulating for centuries. Lydia's wet shoes squeaked on the marble. She resisted the urge to apologize. "This way, please." The butler led them through a corridor lined with more portraits, Ashford's presumably, generation after generation of cold eyes and colder expressions. At the end of the hall, he opened a door into a study. And there, behind a desk the size of a dining table, sat the man who wanted to own her. Rowan Ashford, Duke of Ashford, didn't stand when they entered. He was younger than she'd expected, 30 at most, not the aging aristocrat she'd imagined. Dark hair, severe features, eyes the color of steel in winter. He wore his title like armor, every inch of him radiating the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. He looked at her the way someone might examine a horse they were considering purchasing. "Miss Harrow." His voice was deep, cultured, utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Harrow, please, sit." They sat. Lydia kept her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, her expression neutral. She'd dressed carefully for this meeting, her best gown, though it was 3 seasons out of fashion, her mother's pearls, her hair pinned in a style meant to suggest dignity rather than desperation, but she felt like a fraud, like a girl playing dress-up in someone else's life. "I trust you've reviewed the contract," the Duke said, sliding a sheaf of papers across the desk toward her father. Thomas nodded, not quite looking at him. "Yes, Your Grace. It's generous. It's fair." Rowan's gaze shifted to Lydia. "I assume you understand the terms as well, Miss Harrow?" She met his eyes. "You want a wife. I need my family's debts cleared. It's a business arrangement." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. "Precisely. I'm glad we understand each other." "Oh, I understand perfectly." She kept her voice level, though her heart was hammering. "You need an heir and a duchess to manage your estates and look respectable at dinner parties. I need to save my father from debtor's prison and my younger sisters from being turned out onto the street. You're buying respectability. I'm selling myself." "Lydia." Thomas's face went red. But the Duke didn't look offended. If anything, a hint of something that might have been respect touched the corners of his mouth. "You're blunt," he said. "I'm honest. If we're going to be married, Your Grace, you should know that about me." "Married in name," he corrected. "Make no mistake, Miss Harrow, this is a transaction, not a love match. I require a wife who can fulfill certain duties. Beyond that, I expect us to maintain separate lives as much as propriety allows." The words stung, even though she'd known they were coming, even though this was exactly what she'd agreed to. "I see," she said quietly. "And what duties would those be?" "Hosting when necessary, appearing at social functions, managing the household staff." He paused, his expression unreadable. "Producing an heir, eventually." The clinical way he said it made her skin crawl. "Eventually," she repeated. "I'm not a brute, Miss Harrow. I have no intention of forcing anything upon you. When the time comes, we'll approach it as civilized adults." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I'm offering you security, stability, and a title that will restore your family's standing. In exchange, I ask for your compliance with the basic requirements of the position. That's all." That's all. As if he were asking her to manage his accounts, not sign away her entire future. Thomas cleared his throat. "Your Grace, perhaps we should review the financial arrangements." "Your debts will be settled within the week," Rowan said, not taking his eyes off Lydia. "I'll also provide a dowry settlement for each of your younger daughters and secure a modest property in the country for your retirement. The Harrow name will be preserved. That was our agreement." "Yes, Your Grace, I just wanted to—" "Father," Lydia cut him off gently. She turned back to the Duke. "I have questions." One dark eyebrow rose. "Go on." "Where will we live?" "Primarily at Ashford Hall in Northumberland. We'll spend the season in London when necessary." Northumberland. The word tasted like exile. How often is necessary? As little as possible. "I dislike London." Well, they had that in common, at least. "What about my sisters?" she asked. "May they visit?" "Within reason." "And what's reasonable to you?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Miss Harrow, I'm offering you a position, not a prison sentence. Your family may visit at appropriate intervals. You may correspond with them freely. You'll have an allowance, rooms of your own, and the freedom to pursue whatever interests you wish, provided they don't embarrass the title." How generous. "It is, actually." His voice hardened. "Most men in my position would demand far more and offer far less. I'm being extraordinarily accommodating given the circumstances. The circumstances being that my family is ruined and I have no choice. The circumstances being that this arrangement benefits us both." He stood abruptly, and the sudden movement made Lydia flinch before she could stop herself. He noticed, and something that might have been irritation crossed his face. "I'm not going to hurt you, Miss Harrow. Contrary to whatever Gothic novels you've been reading, I'm not a villain. I'm simply a man who needs a wife and prefers honesty to romance." "Good," she said, forcing herself to stand as well. "Because I'm not looking for romance either." They faced each other across the desk, two people about to bind themselves together for life, strangers united only by necessity and mutual wariness. "Then we have an understanding," Rowan said, We have a contract. Lydia held out her hand. Show me where to sign. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he pulled a pen from the desk drawer and handed it to her. The contract was 6 pages of legal language that essentially said he owned her future and she had no recourse. She read it anyway, every word, while both men watched in silence. Her father looked miserable. The Duke looked impatient. When she reached the final page, she hesitated. This was it. The moment she stopped being Lydia Harrow and became the Duchess of Ashford. The moment she traded her freedom for her family's survival. The moment everything changed. Her hand shook as she put pen to paper. The signature looked foreign to her, too neat, too final, like someone else had written it. There, she said, setting the pen down. It's done. Rowan took the contract, reviewed her signature, then signed his own name with a flourish that spoke of years of practice. His handwriting was sharp and decisive, no hesitation at all. It's done, he agreed. He looked at Thomas. I'll have my solicitor contact yours tomorrow to begin settling the debts. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Lydia's voice came out higher than she intended. That's sufficient time to arrange a small ceremony and for you to prepare. He handed a sealed envelope to her father. This contains the details and initial funds for your immediate needs. I trust everything is in order? Thomas stood, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. Yes, Your Grace. Thank you, Your Grace. You're most kind. Kind. The word was absurd. Miss Harrow, Rowan said, turning to her. I'll send a carriage for you next Tuesday. We'll need to be seen together at least once before the wedding to quiet speculation. Speculation about what? Everyone already knows what this is. They suspect. There's a difference. His expression was unreadable. I prefer not to make it easier for the gossips than necessary. How thoughtful. His eyes narrowed. You're angry. I'm realistic. You're angry, he repeated, and I don't blame you. But we've both made our choices, Miss Harrow. We can either make this tolerable or make it hell. I'd prefer tolerable. So would I, she said quietly. Something in her tone made him pause. For just a second, the cold mask slipped, and she saw something underneath. Exhaustion, maybe, or the same trapped feeling that was crushing her ribs. Then it was gone. Tuesday, then, he said. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. It wasn't a request. The carriage ride home was silent, except for the rain and her father's occasional sniffles. Lydia stared out the window, watching the wealthy neighborhoods give way to shabbier streets, the transition as sharp as a knife cut. I'm sorry, Thomas finally said. I'm so sorry, Lydia. I know. If there had been any other way, there wasn't. She turned to look at him. You did what you had to do. We all are. He's not unkind. The Duke. I've made inquiries. He has a reputation for being cold but fair. He treats his staff well. There are no rumors of, Father, please. She couldn't bear to hear him justify it. It's done. Let's not pretend it's anything other than what it is. He nodded, looking old and broken. When they reached their rented rooms, 3 cramped floors in a building that smelled of cabbage and damp, her mother and sisters were waiting. Well? Margaret Harrow's face was tight with anxiety. It's done, Thomas said heavily. She signed. Her mother's relief was palpable. Oh, thank heaven, thank heaven. Lydia's sisters, Charlotte, 16, and Emma, 14, looked at her with wide eyes. You're really going to marry a duke? Emma whispered. Yes. Is he handsome? Emma! Charlotte smacked her arm. That's not what matters. But Emma ignored her, still staring at Lydia. Well, is he? Lydia thought of those cold steel eyes, that severe face, the way he'd looked at her like a business acquisition. I don't know, she said honestly. I didn't notice. That night, she lay in the bed she shared with her sisters and listened to them breathe. Charlotte's soft snores, Emma's occasional murmurs. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city quiet and washed clean. In 3 weeks, she'd be the Duchess of Ashford. In 3 weeks, she'd be bound to a man who saw her as a means to an end. In 3 weeks, everything would change, and there was no going back. She didn't cry. She was too angry for tears. Angry at her father for his bad investments. Angry at society for its cruelty to the fallen. Angry at the Duke for his cold transaction. Angry at herself for signing those papers. But most of all, she was angry that she'd had no choice. And she swore, lying there in the dark, that she would not be owned. She would play the part he required. The Duchess, the hostess, the eventual mother of his heir, but she would not give him anything more. He wanted a transaction? Fine. She'd give him exactly that and nothing else. Let him have her name, her presence, her compliance. He would never have her. Tuesday came too quickly. Lydia dressed with care, a walking dress in deep blue that Charlotte had altered to fit better, a bonnet that hid most of her face, gloves to hide her nervous hands. She looked like someone playing the part of a lady, which she supposed she was. The Duke's carriage arrived precisely at 10. It was black and expensive and made the neighbors stare. "Where's he taking you?" Charlotte asked, helping her with her bonnet. "Hyde Park, I think. To be seen together." Lydia checked her reflection one last time. "To start the performance." "You look beautiful," Emma said loyally. "I look desperate." "You look brave," her mother corrected, coming to kiss her cheek. "Hold your head high, Lydia. You're about to be a duchess. Don't let anyone forget it." Easy to say, harder to feel. The carriage ride to Hyde Park was mercifully short. When they arrived, Rowan was already there, mounted on a black horse that looked as severe and expensive as he did. He wore riding clothes that probably cost more than her father's yearly income used to be. He dismounted when he saw the carriage, handing the reins to a groom. "Miss Harrow." He offered his hand to help her down. "Punctual. Good." His hand was warm through her glove. She let go as soon as possible. "Your Grace." She managed a curtsy that didn't look completely awkward. "Shall we walk?" He offered his arm. She took it because she had to. His arm was solid under her hand, his pace measured to match hers. They looked, she supposed, like exactly what they were supposed to be. A duke and his future duchess, taking a proper chaperone stroll. Around them, Hyde Park was busy with the usual afternoon crowd, riders, walkers, carriages full of society ladies who had nothing better to do than gossip. Lydia felt their stares like pinpricks. "They're all watching us," she murmured. "That's the point." Rowan's voice was low. "By tomorrow, everyone will know we're engaged. The speculation will be over. Replaced by mockery." "Possibly." He glanced down at her. "Does that bother you?" "Would it matter if it did?" "No." At least he was honest. "But you might as well get used to it. Society can be cruel to newcomers, especially those who arrive through unusual circumstances." "You mean those who marry for money?" "I mean those who don't fit the expected mold." His jaw tightened. "I'm aware of what people will say about you. About us. I'm sorry for that, but I can't control it. You could have chosen someone else. Someone who fit the mold." "I could have." They walked in silence for a moment past a group of ladies who very unsubtly turned to stare. "But I didn't want someone else." That surprised her. "Why not?" "Because everyone else wanted something from me." He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious. "Love, or affection, or the fantasy of changing me into someone softer. You don't want any of that. You want your family saved, and I can do that. It's clean, uncomplicated." "You make it sound simple, isn't it?" She thought about that. In a way, he was right. There was a strange clarity to their arrangement. No false promises, no expectations of love, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. But it still felt like drowning. "Tell me about Ashford Hall," she said, changing the subject. "What do you want to know?" "What's it like?" He considered the question. "Remote? Old? Beautiful in its way, though harsh. Northumberland isn't for everyone. But it's for you. It's where I belong." There was something final in the way he said it, like a door closing. "You'll adjust. Not you'll love it or you'll be happy there. Just you'll adjust." "How many staff?" she asked. "At the hall?" "Nearly 100 between the house and grounds." She nearly tripped. 100? It's a large estate. He steadied her automatically. "Don't worry. You'll have a housekeeper to manage most of it. Mrs. Davison has been with the family for decades. She'll help you learn what you need to know. And what do I need to know? How to run a household, how to entertain when necessary, how to... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. How to represent the title appropriately. You mean how to pretend I belong there? I mean, how to actually belong there. He stopped walking, turning to face her. They were near the Serpentine now, the water glittering in the weak sunlight. Miss Harrow, Lydia, I understand this isn't what you would have chosen, but it is what's happening. You can fight it and be miserable, or you can accept it and make the best of the situation. I'd prefer the latter. Because it's easier for you. Because it's easier for both of us. His gray eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw past the cold exterior to something more complicated underneath. I'm not your enemy. I'm not your savior either. I'm just someone in the same situation you are, trying to make the best of it. The same situation? She couldn't help the bitter laugh. You're not the one being sold. No, I'm the one doing the buying. Do you think that feels any better? He said it quietly, almost to himself. Then louder. We're both trapped, Lydia, just in different ways. She wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. He sounded tired, worn down, human. Why do you need to marry? She asked suddenly. If you dislike the idea so much, why not just not? His expression shuddered immediately. That's not your concern. I'm about to be your wife. It seems like it should be. You're about to be my duchess. There's a difference. He started walking again, and she had to hurry to keep up. My reasons are my own. Everything about you is your own, she muttered. Including me, apparently. He stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. Don't. His voice was low and dangerous. Don't do that. Don't make yourself into a victim. You signed that contract of your own free will. Free will? She laughed, harsh and sharp. My family was facing ruin. What choice did I have? You could have refused. You could have found another way. There was no other way. There's always another way. His eyes bored into hers. You could have taken your sisters and fled to the country. You could have sought employment. You could have been destitute, starved, watched my sisters turned out onto the streets. Her voice rose despite herself. Those aren't choices, Your Grace. Those are just different kinds of death. People were staring now. She could feel it, the weight of dozens of eyes, the whispers starting. Rowan seemed to realize it too. He took a breath, visibly collecting himself. We're making a scene, he said quietly. Good. Let them see what this really is. Lydia, don't call me that. You don't have the right. I will in 3 weeks. He caught her elbow, not roughly but firmly. Whether you like it or not. They stood there, locked in silent battle, while around them the cream of London society whispered and speculated and enjoyed the show. Finally, Lydia looked away. Take me home, she said. Please. He nodded curtly and guided her back to the carriage. Neither of them spoke. The ride was suffocating with unspoken words. When they reached her building, he helped her down one last time. I'll send word about the wedding arrangements, he said stiffly. Fine. Lydia. He caught her hand before she could walk away. This doesn't have to be a war. Doesn't it? She pulled her hand free. You said it yourself, Your Grace. We're both trapped. That sounds like a war to me. She left him standing there and climbed the stairs to her family's rooms, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. Inside, her mother was waiting. How did it go? Lydia thought about the cold bargain, the public performance, the way he'd looked at her like a problem to be managed. It went exactly as expected, she said, and in 3 weeks, it would be permanent. The wedding was small, as promised, humiliatingly small. Lydia stood in the vestry of St. George's, Hanover Square, wearing a gown her mother had sewn from fabric the Duke's household had provided, cream silk that hung too loose at her waist because there had been no time for proper fittings. Charlotte had woven orange blossoms into her hair with shaking fingers, and Emma had cried the entire morning until her eyes were swollen. You look like a princess, Emma had whispered, but they both knew it was a lie. She looked like exactly what she was. A girl playing dress-up in someone else's life, about to marry a stranger for money. The church was nearly empty. Her family sat in the front pew on the bride's side, her father, mother, and sisters forming a pitiful cluster. On the groom's side, there was only an elderly man Lydia didn't recognize and two other guests who looked bored. No crowds, no celebration, no pretense that this was anything but a transaction being made official. Rowan stood at the altar in black, his face expressionless, his posture military straight. He looked at her the way someone might look at an appointment they were obligated to keep. The vicar droned through the ceremony. Lydia heard herself make responses in a voice that didn't sound like her own. When it came time for the vows, she stumbled over obey and saw Rowan's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. The ring he slid onto her finger was heavy gold, clearly old, probably some family heirloom dragged out of a vault and polished up for the occasion. It felt like a shackle. "You may kiss the bride." Rowan leaned in, not hesitant, not gentle, but efficient. His lips brushed hers for the briefest second, cold and formal, sealing a bargain neither of them wanted. And just like that, she was the Duchess of Ashford. The breakfast afterward was worse than the ceremony. They gathered in a private room at Rowan's townhouse, the same room where she'd signed the contract 3 weeks ago, and made awkward conversation over food no one ate. Her father tried to make a toast that came out garbled and embarrassing. Her mother cried into her handkerchief. Charlotte and Emma sat close together, looking lost. Rowan barely spoke. He sat at the head of the table, responding when absolutely necessary, his attention clearly elsewhere. Finally, mercifully, it was over. "The carriage is ready, Your Grace," the butler said to Lydia, and the title felt like a slap. "To take you to Ashford Hall." "Now?" She hadn't expected to leave immediately. "The Duke prefers to travel today," the butler explained, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. Of course he did. Lydia said goodbye to her family on the front steps. Her mother clutched her so tightly she couldn't breathe, whispering instructions about being a good wife that made Lydia want to scream. Her father pressed her hand and couldn't meet her eyes. Charlotte tried to be brave and failed. Emma just cried. "I'll write," Lydia promised. "Every week, I promise." "Be happy," Charlotte whispered. "Please, Lydia, try to be happy." But happiness wasn't part of the contract. The journey to Northumberland took 3 days. 3 days trapped in a carriage with a husband who treated her like a stranger he was obligated to transport. They stopped at coaching inns where Rowan had secured private rooms, separate rooms, she noted, with a mixture of relief and humiliation. He was polite, distant, and utterly unreachable. On the second night, at an inn somewhere in Yorkshire, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "How long are you planning to ignore me?" she asked over dinner in their private parlor. Rowan looked up from his plate, genuinely surprised. "I'm not ignoring you. You've barely spoken 10 words since we left London. We have nothing to discuss. We're married. And yes, I'm aware." He cut into his beef with surgical precision. "What would you like to discuss, Lydia?" The way he said her name, like a formality he was forcing himself to observe, made her want to throw her wine at him. "Anything," she said. "The weather, the countryside, your favorite color, anything that makes us seem like two people who chose to spend the rest of our lives together instead of two prisoners in the same cell." His knife paused mid-cut. "Is that what this feels like to you, prison?" "Don't pretend you don't feel the same way." "I don't." He set down his utensils carefully. "I feel like someone fulfilling an obligation. There's a difference." "Not much of one." They stared at each other across the small table. The fire crackled in the hearth. Somewhere below, the inn's other guests were laughing and talking, living normal lives. "I'm not good at this," Rowan said finally. "Small talk, pretending, playing the attentive husband." He picked up his wine glass, studied it. "I thought that was understood." "It was. I just didn't realize how exhausting it would be." "For both of us, apparently." That surprised her. The admission that he found this difficult too. She'd assumed nothing about this bothered him, that he was perfectly content with the cold transaction. "When we get to Ashford Hall," he said, "things will be easier. You'll have your own space, your own routine. We won't have to—" He gestured vaguely between them. "Perform for each other constantly." How romantic. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "You knew what you were signing up for. Doesn't mean I have to like it." "No," he agreed quietly. I suppose it doesn't. They finished the meal in silence, but it felt less hostile than before, more like a truce between two soldiers who'd realized fighting was pointless. Ashford Hall appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon of the third day. Lydia had been dozing against the carriage window when Rowan said, "We're here." She sat up, peering out at the landscape. They'd been traveling through increasingly wild country, hills that rolled into moorland, stone walls dividing empty fields, sky that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. And there, rising from the hills like something out of a Gothic novel, was Ashford Hall. It was massive, gray stone, multiple wings, a tower at one end, windows that glinted in the dying light. It looked old, older than anything Lydia had ever seen, like it had grown out of the earth itself. It looked like a fortress designed to keep the world out. She searched for the right word. Intimidating, Rowan supplied. I know, my mother hated it. It was the first time he'd mentioned his mother. Lydia filed that away. I was going to say impressive. That too. He was watching her carefully. It's been in my family for 400 years. Every Duke of Ashford has lived here, died here. It's not always easy, but it's home. The way he said home made something in her chest ache. For the first time, she caught a glimpse of what this place meant to him. Not just a house, but an anchor, a belonging. The carriage pulled up to the front entrance, where a line of servants stood waiting, arranged by rank like a military formation. At the front was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that could freeze water. Mrs. Davison, Rowan said as he helped Lydia down. The housekeeper I mentioned. Mrs. Davison curtsied, her eyes taking in every detail of Lydia's appearance and clearly finding it wanting. Your Grace, she said to Rowan. Then, with slightly less warmth, Your Grace, to Lydia. Welcome home, sir. We've prepared the Duchess's rooms as instructed. Excellent. Rowan turned to Lydia. Mrs. Davison will show you to your quarters. I have estate business to attend to. And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the house without a backward glance, leaving her standing there with a housekeeper who looked like she'd rather eat glass than accept a new duchess. This way, Your Grace, Mrs. Davison said, her tone making it clear that the title was courtesy, not respect. Lydia followed her inside. The interior of Ashford Hall was as overwhelming as the exterior. Soaring ceilings, dark wood paneling, more portraits of grim-faced ancestors. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors as Mrs. Davison led her through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The hall has 68 rooms, Mrs. Davison said, her voice clipped and efficient. The family wing is in the east section. His Grace's rooms are on the third floor. Yours are on the second. Of course they were. Separate floors. Separate lives. They climbed a grand staircase, turned down another corridor, and finally stopped at a set of double doors. Your rooms, Your Grace. The suite was beautiful. She had to admit that. A sitting room decorated in pale blue and cream, a bedroom with an enormous four-poster bed, a dressing room larger than the entire apartment her family had been living in. Windows overlooked the grounds, offering views of formal gardens and wild moorland beyond. It was exquisite. It was lonely. It was a gilded cage. The staff will unpack your things, Mrs. Davison said. Dinner is at 8 in the dining room. His Grace expects punctuality. I'm sure he does. Mrs. Davison's eyes narrowed slightly. Is there anything else you require, Your Grace? Yes. A way out. A time machine. A different life. No, thank you. When the housekeeper left, Lydia sank onto the settee and stared at her new home. Somewhere in this massive house was the man she'd married, probably already absorbed in his estate business, probably not thinking about her at all. She was utterly, completely alone. The next week passed in a blur of learning, room layouts, staff names, household routines, all the intricate mechanisms that kept a place like Ashford Hall running. Mrs. Davison was a relentless teacher, correcting every mistake with barely concealed disdain. The Duke prefers his breakfast at 7, not 7:15, Your Grace. The housekeeper manages the indoor staff, Your Grace. You don't address the maids directly. That's not how it's done at Ashford Hall, Your Grace. Everything Lydia did was wrong. Everything she'd learned growing up in her comfortable but modest household was useless here. She was drowning in rules and protocols and expectations she'd never been prepared for. And Rowan was no help. He was present for meals, punctually, at 8 for dinner every evening, but beyond polite inquiries about her day, he said little. After dinner, he retreated to his study or the library, leaving her to wander the enormous house alone. "Is he always like this?" she asked Mrs. Davison one afternoon, frustrated beyond endurance. "Like what, Your Grace?" "Absent. Even when he's present." The housekeeper's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her armor Lydia had seen. "His Grace has his reasons. It's not my place to discuss them. But it is my place to live with them." "Yes, Your Grace, I suppose it is." That night at dinner, Lydia decided to push. "Tell me about your day," she said, as the footman served the first course. Rowan looked up, surprised. "My day? You manage the estate. You must do something besides brood in your study." His eyebrows rose. "I don't brood." "What do you call it, then?" "Working." But there was the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. "I was reviewing the tenant farm reports, checking the harvest projections, boring administrative matters." "Tell me anyway." So he did, haltingly at first, clearly unused to sharing the details of his day, but gradually with more ease. He talked about crop rotations and drainage problems and a dispute between two farmers over a boundary line. It wasn't riveting conversation, but it was something, a crack in the wall. "You care about it," Lydia said when he finished. "The land, the people. It's my responsibility. It's more than that." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yes," he admitted, "it is. This place, the estate, the tenants, all of it, it's been in my family for generations. When I die, I'll pass it to my son, and he'll pass it to his. That matters. Continuity matters. And that's why you needed to marry. For the son, the heir." "Partially." He set down his fork. "But also because a duke without a duchess is incomplete, in the eyes of society at least. I was being pressured to marry. I chose to do it on my terms." "How noble." "It wasn't meant to be noble. It was meant to be practical." He studied her across the table. "You think I'm cold. Aren't you?" "Probably." He said it without defensiveness. "I had to be, after—" He stopped abruptly. "After what?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter." "It does if it explains why my husband treats me like a piece of furniture." The words came out harsher than she'd intended. Rowan's face shuddered immediately. "I apologize if my behavior has been inadequate." His voice went formal, distant. "I'll endeavor to be more attentive." "That's not what I—" "If you'll excuse me, I have correspondence to attend to." He stood, leaving his meal half finished, and walked out. Lydia sat alone in the vast dining room, surrounded by ancestral portraits that seemed to judge her for driving their descendant away, and wanted to scream. 2 weeks after their arrival at Ashford Hall, an invitation arrived that changed everything. "Lady Pembroke is hosting a ball," Rowan said over breakfast, holding the cream-colored card like it might bite him. "In 3 weeks. She's invited us both." Lydia looked up from her tea. "Lady Pembroke?" "The wife of the Marquis of Pembroke. Their estate is 20 miles south. They're influential in the county." He set the invitation down with visible reluctance. "We have to attend." "Do we?" "Yes, you need to be introduced to local society. Establish yourself as the new Duchess. It's expected." Expected. That word again, covering everything unpleasant like snow over mud. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear," she said. "I'll have a dressmaker sent from Newcastle. You'll need several gowns made anyway." He paused, then added, "Mrs. Davison will help you." "How kind of her." He caught the sarcasm. "She's been difficult? She hates me." "She doesn't hate you. She's protective of the household, of me." He stood, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. Give her time. She'll come around. But Lydia wasn't sure she wanted to wait. She'd been at Ashford Hall for 2 weeks, and every day felt harder than the last. The house was too big, too empty. The staff were polite but distant. Mrs. Davison watched her every move with critical eyes. And Rowan? Rowan was a ghost she occasionally glimpsed at meals. This wasn't a marriage. It wasn't even a partnership. It was two people existing in the same space, carefully avoiding any real connection. The dressmaker arrived from Newcastle 3 days later, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Collins, who brought samples and patterns and measuring tapes. She transformed Lydia's sitting room into a temporary workshop, draping fabrics and sketching designs while Lydia stood like a doll being dressed. For the ball, I'd suggest something elegant but not ostentatious, Mrs. Collins said, pinning fabric at Lydia's waist. You want to make an impression without appearing to try too hard. Cream silk, perhaps, with minimal embellishment, or a pale blue to match your eyes. What about red? Lydia said impulsively. Mrs. Collins paused. Red, Your Grace. Yes, deep red, something that makes a statement. That would certainly be memorable. The dressmaker's tone suggested it might be memorable for the wrong reasons. But perhaps for your first society appearance as the Duchess, red, Lydia repeated firmly. I want red. When Mrs. Collins left, Mrs. Davison appeared in the doorway, her expression disapproving. Red is rather bold for a first appearance, Your Grace. Good. The previous Duchess always wore pastels to the Pembroke balls. Lydia turned to face her. I'm not the previous Duchess, Mrs. Davison. I assume that's abundantly clear to everyone, including you. The housekeeper's mouth thinned. Indeed it is, Your Grace. Then I'll dress accordingly, unless His Grace has specific instructions about my wardrobe. No, Your Grace. His Grace leaves such matters to your discretion. How generous of him. Lydia knew she sounded petulant, bitter, but she couldn't help it. Everything about this place, this life, made her want to fight. Will there be anything else? Mrs. Davison hesitated, then said quietly, The previous Duchess, the Duke's mother, she struggled here too. At first, Ashford Hall can be overwhelming, especially for those not born to it. It was the closest thing to kindness the housekeeper had offered. Lydia softened slightly. What happened to her? She left. When the Duke was 12, went to live in Italy with a painter. Mrs. Davison's expression was carefully neutral. She died there 5 years ago. His Grace attended the funeral but didn't speak of it afterward. Suddenly, so much made sense. The coldness, the distance, the way Rowan treated marriage like a business contract, because that's what it had been for his parents, and it had ended in abandonment. He thinks I'll leave too, Lydia said quietly. I couldn't say, Your Grace. But the answer was in her eyes. That night, Lydia knocked on the door of Rowan's study for the first time. He called for her to enter, looking up from his desk with surprise when he saw who it was. Is something wrong? Mrs. Davison told me about your mother. His expression went blank. Did she? I'm sorry. Why? You didn't know her. I'm sorry that she left, that it hurt you. It didn't hurt me. He said it too quickly, too defensively. It was a long time ago. I barely remember her. That's a lie. He stood abruptly. Lydia. I'm not her, she said. I'm not going to run away to Italy or anywhere else. I signed a contract, and I'll honor it. But you need to stop treating me like I'm going to disappear the moment you turn your back. I don't... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture she'd seen from him. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. There's nothing to explain. My mother was unhappy here. She left. My father drank himself to death 3 years later. I inherited at 15. End of story. But it wasn't. She could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes. Is that why you married me? She asked. Someone who had no choice but to stay? That's not... He stopped again, and when he looked at her, something in his expression made her chest ache. I married you because I thought it would be simple, clean, no expectations, no disappointments, just an arrangement. And how's that working out for you? Terribly, he admitted. The honesty shocked her into silence. I don't know how to do this, Rowan said quietly. How to have someone here. How to... He gestured helplessly. I've been alone in this house for years. I don't know how to not be alone. Neither do I, Lydia said. But we could try. Together. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. The part that wanted to trust fighting the part that had learned not to. All right, he said finally. We can try. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a promise, but it was something. The night of the Pembroke ball arrived too quickly. Lydia stood in her dressing room while her new lady's maid, a quiet girl named Anne, helped her into the red gown. It was beautiful, she had to admit. Deep crimson silk that hugged her figure and made her pale skin glow, with delicate beading at the bodice that caught the light. She looked like someone who belonged, or at least someone who was pretending convincingly. You look lovely, Your Grace, Anne said softly. I look terrified. That too, Your Grace. When Lydia came downstairs, Rowan was waiting in the entry hall. He wore formal evening clothes that made him look even more severe than usual, but when he saw her, something shifted in his expression. Red, he said. You hate it. No. He crossed to her, offered his arm. I think it's perfect. They'll all be watching you anyway. Might as well give them something to watch. It was the closest he'd come to a compliment, and it warmed something in her chest. The carriage ride to Pembroke Manor was silent, but not uncomfortably so. Rowan seemed lost in thought, and Lydia was too nervous to make conversation. She kept smoothing the red silk, checking her hair, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. When they arrived, the house was already full of guests, light blazing from every window, carriages lined up along the drive, music and laughter spilling out into the night. Ready? Rowan asked as a footman opened their carriage door. No. Good. Neither am I. He helped her down, and together they walked into the lion's den. The ballroom was enormous, dripping with chandeliers, packed with the elite of the county. Everyone who mattered, everyone who would judge her and find her wanting. Conversation stuttered to a halt as they entered. Every eye turned to stare. At her. At the girl in red who'd bought her way into a title. The Duke and Duchess of Ashford, the butler announced. Lydia felt the weight of those stares like physical blows. She heard the whispers start immediately, too low to make out the words, but the tone was clear. Shock, disdain, judgment. Rowan's hand tightened on her elbow, a brief reassurance, and then they were moving forward to greet their hosts. Lady Pembroke was a handsome woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper smile. Your Grace, she said to Rowan, warmth and familiarity in her voice. Then turning to Lydia with notably less warmth, and this must be the new Duchess. How delightful. The pause before delightful was deliberate. Lady Pembroke, Lydia said, curtsying, thank you for inviting us. Well, we simply had to meet Rowan's bride. Lady Pembroke's eyes traveled over Lydia's dress, her hair, her jewelry, cataloging every detail. Such a quick courtship, wasn't it? We were all quite surprised by the announcement. Were you? Rowan said flatly. Oh, yes. None of us even knew you were courting. Her smile turned predatory. Though I suppose when one finds the right person, why wait? The implication was clear. He hadn't found the right person. He'd found someone desperate enough to agree to his terms. If you'll excuse us, Rowan said, already moving away. I see the Marquis. They escaped into the crowd, but the damage was done. Everywhere Lydia looked, she saw the same expression, curiosity mixed with contempt. She was a spectacle, an oddity, something to be examined and dismissed. Dance with me, Rowan said suddenly. What? Dance with me, now. He was already leading her toward the dance floor. They're going to talk anyway. Might as well give them something to talk about. The music swelled, a waltz. Rowan pulled her into position with more confidence than she'd expected, and suddenly they were moving, spinning across the polished floor while everyone watched. I didn't know you could dance, Lydia said. There are many things you don't know about me. Apparently. He pulled her closer as they turned. You're doing well. I'm dying inside. You're not showing it, that's what matters. His gray eyes met hers. They want you to break, Lydia. Don't give them the satisfaction. Why do they hate me? They don't even know me. You're different. New. You didn't grow up in their world, and they can smell it. His voice hardened. And they know our marriage wasn't a love match. That makes you vulnerable. Makes you a target. The waltz ended. They separated, and immediately a group of ladies descended like vultures. "Your Grace, you simply must introduce us to your bride properly," one of them said, a woman in her 40s with elaborate diamonds and a cold smile. Rowan made the introductions with obvious reluctance. Lady Catherine, Lady Anne, Mrs. Harrison, names and titles that blurred together while they all smiled and said things that sounded polite but felt like knives. "Where's your family from, dear?" Lady Catherine asked. "London," Lydia said. "Oh? Which part?" "Bloomsbury." "How, quaint." Another deliberate pause. "And your father's profession?" Lydia felt the trap closing. "He was in trade." "Trade?" Mrs. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "How industrious." They might as well have said common or beneath us. The meaning was the same. Rowan's jaw tightened. "If you'll excuse us." "Oh, but we were just getting acquainted with the Duchess," Lady Anne said. "Tell us, dear, how did you and the Duke meet? It must have been quite romantic." "It wasn't," Lydia's patient snapped. "We met because my family was ruined and he needed a wife. He paid my father's debts, and I signed a contract. There was nothing romantic about it. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every conversation within earshot stopped. Even the music seemed to falter. Lady Catherine recovered first, her smile vicious. "Well, how refreshingly honest." "That's one word for it," Mrs. Harrison murmured. "If you'll excuse me," Lydia said, turning away before they could see how badly she was shaking. "I need some air." She pushed through the crowd, ignoring Rowan calling her name, and escaped onto the terrace. The night air was cold and sharp, but she gulped it down, trying not to cry. Behind her, she could hear the conversation starting up again, louder now, excited, full of scandal and speculation. She'd just confirmed everything they suspected. She'd handed them ammunition and painted a target on her own back. "Lydia." She spun around. Rowan stood in the doorway, backlit by the ballroom's golden glow. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." He crossed to her, and there was something fierce in his expression. "They were baiting you. Anyone would have snapped. I made it worse. You told the truth. There's no shame in that. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're mocking." "Aren't I?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Trust me, Lydia, they've been mocking me for years. The cold Duke, the heartless heir, the man who'd rather bury himself in Northumberland than engage with society. I stopped caring what they thought a long time ago. Well, I haven't had the practice." They stood there on the terrace, music and laughter drifting from inside, the ruins of her first society appearance scattered around them. "We should go back inside," Rowan said finally. "I can't." "You can." He offered his hand. "And you will. Because if you run now, they'll never let you forget it." She looked at that hand, strong, steady, unexpectedly kind, and made a choice. She took it. They walked back into the ballroom together, and if people stared, if whispers followed them, Lydia kept her head high and her hand in her husband's and refused to break. But when they finally returned to Ashford Hall in the small hours of the morning, she went straight to her rooms and cried into her pillow until there were no tears left. This was her life now, this cold house, this distant husband, this world that would never accept her. And there was no escape. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close, and a headache that felt like someone had driven nails through her skull. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was or why her pillow was damp. Then it all came rushing back. The ball, the whispers, her own spectacular self-destruction in front of everyone who mattered. "You told the truth," she muttered to herself, throwing an arm over her eyes. "Congratulations, you're honest and ruined." A knock at the door made her groan. "Come in," she called, expecting Anne with breakfast she wouldn't eat. But it was Mrs. Davison who entered, carrying a silver tray with tea and what looked like correspondence. "Good morning, Your Grace." The housekeeper's voice was carefully neutral. "His Grace asked me to bring these to you. They arrived this morning." Lydia sat up, accepting the tray. 3 letters, all on expensive stationery, all addressed to the Duchess of Ashford, in elegant script that probably cost more than her family's monthly rent used to. "What are they?" "Invitations, Your Grace, to tea. Lady Catherine, Mrs. Harrison, and Lady Pembroke herself." "Of course." The vultures wanted another chance to pick at her bones. Burn them. Mrs. Davison's eyebrows rose fractionally. Your Grace? I'm not going. Tell them I'm indisposed. Tell them whatever you want. I don't care. His Grace suggested you might feel that way. The housekeeper set down a second letter, this one in Rowan's sharp handwriting. He asked me to give you this as well. Lydia broke the seal, unfolding the single sheet. Lydia, I know you want to hide. Don't. They're testing you. Refuse these invitations, and you'll confirm everything they believe about you. Accept them, and you'll have another chance to prove them wrong. The choice is yours, but think carefully about which version of yourself you want to be. R. She read it twice, fury building with each word. How dare he, she said softly. Your Grace? How dare he tell me what to do? How dare he pretend he understands what last night was like for me? She crumpled the letter. Where is he? In his study, Your Grace. But he asked not to be... Lydia was already out of bed, pulling on her dressing gown. She didn't bother with slippers, just stormed down the corridor, down the stairs, through the halls she was finally learning to navigate, until she reached Rowan's study and threw open the door without knocking. He looked up from his desk, startled. Lydia, don't you dare lecture me about hiding. She slammed the door behind her. You've been hiding in this house for years. I'm working. You're avoiding. There's a difference. She threw his crumpled letter on his desk. You want me to go drink tea with women who hate me, who spent last night tearing me apart for their entertainment? Why? So they can do it again? Rowan stood slowly. So you can show them you're not afraid. But I am afraid. Then don't show it. His voice was maddeningly calm. That's what they want, Lydia. They want you to break, to run, to prove you don't belong here. I don't belong here. You know it. I know it. They certainly know it. You're the Duchess of Ashford. You belong here more than any of them. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Because you gave me the title? Because you bought me? That doesn't make me one of them, Rowan. It just makes me a better class of servant. His jaw tightened. Is that what you think you are? A servant. What else? I'm here to manage your household, host your dinners, eventually give you an heir. Those are the duties you outlined. They're not a wife's duties. They're an employee's. That's not... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in that rare gesture of frustration. You're twisting everything. Am I? Then tell me, what am I to you? Really? The question hung between them, heavy and dangerous. You're my wife, he said finally. In name. What do you want from me, Lydia? He came around the desk, and there was something raw in his expression. You want me to pretend this is a love match? That I married you because I couldn't live without you? We both know that's a lie. I want you to act like you don't regret it, she said quietly. I want you to act like having me here isn't some burden you're forced to carry. I want... Her voice broke. I want to feel like less of a mistake. The silence that followed was suffocating. You're not a mistake, Rowan said, and he sounded almost angry. You're the best decision I could have made under the circumstances. What circumstances? You never told me why you needed to marry so badly. Why now? Why me? Because you didn't want anything from me except money, he said bluntly. Every other woman I considered wanted love or romance or the fantasy of changing me into someone softer. You just wanted your family saved. It was clean, simple. And how's that working out for you? She threw his own words back at him. Terribly, he admitted again. Because it turns out you're not simple at all. You're stubborn and proud, and you won't just accept your place quietly like you were supposed to. I'm sorry I'm not the convenient transaction you ordered. I'm not sorry. The words came out rough, surprising both of them. I should be, but I'm not. You're... He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. You're more than I expected, better than I deserve, and I don't know what to do with that. Lydia stared at him, her anger deflating into something more complicated. The invitations, she said finally. If I accept them, if I go smile and make polite conversation with women who despise me, will you tell me the truth about why you really needed to marry? He looked like he wanted to refuse. Then, yes? All of it? All of it. Fine. She picked up the crumpled letter, smoothed it out. I'll go, but I'm wearing red again. The corner of his mouth twitched. I wouldn't expect anything less. Lady Catherine's house was smaller than Pembroke Manor, but no less intimidating. All Georgian elegance and carefully maintained gardens. Lydia sat in the drawing room with 5 other women, balancing a teacup she didn't want and smiling at comments designed to wound. Such a lovely gown, Your Grace, Lady Anne said. Is that the London fashion now? So vibrant. Lydia was indeed wearing red. A different dress, but just as bold. I wouldn't know. I haven't been to London in weeks. Of course not. You're quite buried up at Ashford Hall, aren't you, Mrs. Us? Harrison sipped her tea delicately. Such an isolated place. I don't know how you stand it. I manage. Do you? Lady Catherine leaned forward, all false concern. We heard the Duke spends most of his time in his study. You must get terribly lonely. The trap was obvious, but Lydia had learned from last time. His Grace has responsibilities to the estate. I respect that. How modern of you. Lady Anne's smile was sharp. Most wives would demand more attention. Most wives aren't content with a business arrangement, Mrs. Harrison added, and there it was, the knife sliding between ribs. Lydia set down her teacup carefully. You want me to be embarrassed about my marriage. I'm not. Yes, it was arranged. Yes, it serves both our purposes. But it's honest, which is more than I can say for half the unions in this room. The silence was electric. I beg your pardon? Lady Catherine's voice went cold. You heard me. Lydia stood, tired of playing defense. Everyone here married for advantage. Money, titles, connections. You just had better packaging. But don't pretend your matches were any purer than mine just because your fathers negotiated in drawing rooms instead of solicitors' offices. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose. Lydia pulled on her gloves. You've already decided I don't belong. Fine. But I'm still the Duchess of Ashford, and that means something whether you like it or not. So you can keep trying to humiliate me, or you can accept that I'm here to stay. Either way, I'm done pretending your approval matters. She walked out before anyone could respond, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The carriage ride back to Ashford Hall was a blur. She'd done it again. Burned bridges, made enemies, said exactly what she shouldn't. But this time, she didn't regret it. She was tired of being ashamed. Rowan was waiting when she arrived, standing in the entrance hall like he'd been pacing. How was tea? He asked. Terrible. I probably made everything worse. She pulled off her gloves. But I don't care. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Good. Good? You stood up for yourself. That's what matters. He gestured toward his study. Come on, I owe you an explanation. Inside, he poured them both whiskey without asking if she wanted it. She took the glass, settled into the chair across from his desk, and waited. Rowan stared at his drink for a long moment before speaking. 3 years ago, he said finally, my cousin Edmund challenged my right to the title. Lydia sat up straighter. What? The dukedom has a complicated inheritance. My father's line was legitimate, but there were questions about my grandfather's marriage, technicalities involving Scottish law and prior contracts. Edmund found a solicitor willing to argue that the entire line was invalid, which would make him the rightful heir. That's insane. It's also expensive, time-consuming, and publicly humiliating. Rowan took a drink. The case has been dragging through courts for years. Edmund keeps finding new arguments, new witnesses, new ways to keep it alive. He's determined. What does that have to do with marriage? Everything. Rowan's voice went bitter. Edmund's married with 4 sons. The courts look at him. Established family man, multiple heirs, properly domesticated, and then they look at me. Unmarried, no children, living alone in Northumberland like some Gothic villain. It makes his case stronger, makes me look unstable. Understanding dawned cold and sharp. So you needed a wife to look more legitimate. I needed a wife to stop giving the courts reasons to question my fitness as Duke. I needed to look settled, responsible, like someone who takes the title seriously. He met her eyes. And I needed to do it quickly before the next hearing, which meant I couldn't court anyone properly. Couldn't go through the usual social dance. I needed someone who'd accept a business arrangement and ask for money instead of love. Someone desperate enough not to ask questions. Someone practical enough to understand the situation. He paused. I should have told you before, but I couldn't risk you refusing because the situation was too complicated. So you lied by omission. Yes. At least he didn't deny it. Lydia stood, went to the window. Outside, the moorland stretched wild and empty under gray skies. What happens if Edmund wins? He gets the title, the estates, everything. I'd be left with nothing. And me? You'd still be my wife. The marriage contract is separate from the title dispute. Your family's debts would remain settled, but you wouldn't be a duchess anymore. She turned to face him. How likely is it that he'll win? Honestly, I don't know. The law is murky. It could go either way. His expression was carefully blank. The next hearing is in 6 months. The judge suggested I present evidence of stability. A wife helps. An heir would help more. There it was. The real reason for the marriage, laid bare. So when you said eventually about children, Lydia said slowly, I meant we have time, but not unlimited time. If Edmund wins before we have a son, the title passes to him regardless. He set down his glass. I'm sorry, I know this isn't what you signed up for. I didn't sign up for any of this, she said. But you're right. We made an agreement, and I'll honor it. Lydia, when do you need an heir by? He looked startled by the directness. The hearing is in December. If we had a son before then, or at least proof of pregnancy, it would strengthen the case considerably. 6 months. He wanted her pregnant in 6 months. I see. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Well, I suppose we should start working on that then. Not like this. He stood abruptly. Not when you're angry and feel betrayed. I told you before, I'm not a brute. I won't force this. You're not forcing anything. I'm choosing to fulfill my obligations. Your obligations aren't worth your misery. Aren't they? She laughed without humor. My family's entire future depends on this marriage, on you keeping your title. If Edmund wins, what happens to your ability to pay my father's creditors? To provide for my sisters? Rowan went very still. The debts have already been settled. That's separate. But the rest, the property you promised my father for retirement, the dowries for Charlotte and Emma, those were part of our agreement too. If you lose everything, how do you pay for those? I'll find a way. Will you? She crossed her arms. Be honest, Rowan. If Edmund takes the title, takes the estates, takes your fortune, what's left for anyone? The silence was answer enough. Right, Lydia said. So we both have a stake in winning this, which means we both do whatever's necessary, including producing an heir. Not like this, he repeated, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. Not when it's just another transaction, not when you're looking at me like you're what? A stranger I married for money? That's what you are, Rowan. He flinched like she'd hit him. I should go, Lydia said, heading for the door. We can discuss the practical arrangements later when we're both calmer. Lydia, wait. But she was already gone, fleeing down the corridor to her rooms where she could finally breathe. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Lydia's life. She and Rowan circled each other like wary animals, polite at meals, distant everywhere else. They didn't discuss the heir situation again. They didn't discuss much of anything, but she kept getting invitations, not from Lady Catherine's circle, they'd made their position clear, but from others. A Mrs. Thornton who ran a local charity, a Miss Davies who organized a book club, smaller social circles, less prestigious but genuine. They like you, Anne said one afternoon, helping Lydia dress for another tea. The local people, not the fancy ones, but the regular folks. They think you're brave. Brave or stupid? Both, probably. The maid grinned, but in a good way. It was something. A toehold in a world that had seemed completely closed to her. Rowan noticed. Of course he did. You're going out more, he commented at dinner one night. Is that a problem? No, it's good. You're building connections. He paused. I'm glad. Are you? She couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. Yes. He set down his fork. I know you think I want you hidden away up here, but that's not true. I want you to have a life, Lydia. Beyond just being my wife. How generous. His jaw tightened. I'm trying here. So am I. She met his eyes across the table. We're both trying very hard to make the best of a situation neither of us wanted. Congratulations, we're very noble. Why are you angry with me? I told you the truth like you asked. I'm not angry about the truth. I'm angry that there's more truth. That every time I think I understand what this marriage is, you reveal another layer. What else haven't you told me, Rowan? What other surprises are waiting? Nothing. He said it too quickly. I don't believe you. Then I don't know what to do. He stood, throwing his napkin down. I've been honest. I've given you space. I've tried to be what you need, but nothing's good enough. Because what I need is a husband, not a landlord. The words echoed in the vast dining room. Rowan stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. I don't know. And that was the truth. I don't know what I want anymore. I just know this isn't it. He left without another word. That night, Lydia couldn't sleep. She paced her rooms, restless and frustrated, until finally she gave up and went downstairs. Maybe the library would have something to distract her, but when she reached the main floor, she saw light coming from under Rowan's study door. She should leave him alone. They'd said enough tonight. Instead, she knocked. Come in. He was at his desk, papers spread everywhere, looking exhausted. When he saw her, surprise flickered across his face. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I. He gestured to the papers. Estate business. It never ends. She came closer, glancing at the documents. Numbers, contracts, letters from solicitors. Is this about Edmund? Some of it. The rest is just normal responsibility. He rubbed his eyes. Running a dukedom isn't as romantic as novels make it seem. Nothing is as romantic as novels make it seem. She perched on the edge of his desk. Rowan, I'm sorry for earlier. I shouldn't have. You were right. He looked up at her. You deserve a husband, not someone who treats you like a business partner. I just don't know how to be anything else. Then maybe we learn together. How? She thought about it. By actually talking, by not hiding in separate wings of this enormous house, by acting like we're on the same side instead of opposite ones. We are on the same side. Are we? Because most of the time it feels like we're fighting different wars. He stood, coming around the desk until they were close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. I don't want to fight you, Lydia. I don't want to fight you either. She reached out, touched his hand carefully. So let's stop. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Rowan's fingers curled around hers, tentative, like he was afraid she'd pull away. She didn't. Tell me something true, she said. Something you've never told anyone. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I'm terrified of losing this place. Not because of the title or the money, because it's all I have. My mother left, my father drank himself into the grave, and this house, these walls, they're the only thing that stayed. If Edmund takes that... He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't know who I am without it. The confession hung between them, raw and painful. You're still you, Lydia said softly. Title or no title, Duke or not, you're still Rowan. Am I? I've been the Duke of Ashford since I was 15. I don't remember being anything else. She squeezed his hand. Then maybe it's time to find out. They stood there in the quiet study, hands linked, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. It wasn't love, not yet. Maybe not ever, but it was something. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Lydia was in the morning room, reviewing menus with Mrs. Davison, a task she was finally learning to do without embarrassing herself, when a footman brought in the post on a silver tray. For his grace, the footman said. But Lydia saw the seal and her blood went cold. The same seal that had been on Edmund's legal challenges, according to the documents she'd glimpsed in Rowan's study. I'll take it to him, she said, snatching it up. She found Rowan in the stables, which had become his refuge lately. He looked up when she entered, surprise turning to concern when he saw her expression. What's wrong? She handed him the letter silently. He broke the seal, read quickly, and his face went white. Rowan? He's moving the hearing up. His voice was flat, shocked. Edmund petitioned the court. They've agreed to hear the case next month instead of December. Next month? But that's 4 weeks. He looked at her, and she saw real fear in his eyes for the first time. We have 4 weeks. Maybe it's a bluff. Maybe he's trying to rattle you. It's not a bluff. His solicitor found something, new evidence, they claim, something that strengthens his case enough that the judge agreed to expedite. Rowan crumpled the letter. We're out of time. Lydia's mind raced. What do we do? I don't know. My solicitor will want to review everything, prepare arguments, but if Edmund has new evidence... He stopped, seemed to pull himself together with visible effort. I need to go to London, meet with my legal team, figure out what the hell he found. I'm coming with you. Lydia, I'm coming with you, she repeated firmly. We're in this together, remember? Same side. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Thank you. They left for London the next morning. The city felt different now, louder, dirtier, more chaotic than Lydia remembered. Or maybe she'd changed. Maybe weeks at Ashford Hall had made her someone who didn't fit here anymore either. Rowan's London townhouse was dark and closed up, sheets over the furniture, dust in the corners. They moved through it like ghosts, and within hours it was full of solicitors and barristers, all of them grim-faced and urgent. The evidence is problematic, Mr. Fitzwilliam, Rowan's lead solicitor, said. They were gathered in the study, documents spread across every surface. Edmonds found a witness, a woman claiming to be the daughter of your grandfather's first wife. If her testimony is credible, it would invalidate your grandfather's second marriage, which means your father's birth was illegitimate, which means... I'm not the rightful duke, Rowan finished. I understand the implications. Can we discredit her? Lydia asked. Fitzwilliam looked surprised that she'd spoken. We're trying, Your Grace, but she has documents, birth records, letters. They may be forged, but proving that takes time. Time we don't have, Rowan said. No, Your Grace. We don't. The meeting dragged on for hours. Legal strategies, counter-arguments, technical points of law that made Lydia's head spin. But the conclusion was clear. Edmund had strengthened his case considerably, and they were scrambling to respond. When the solicitors finally left, Rowan poured himself a drink and stared out the window at London's evening lights. We could lose, he said quietly. We could actually lose. Lydia came to stand beside him. We could, but we haven't yet. Ever the optimist. One of us has to be. She touched his arm. Rowan, whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Will we? He turned to face her, and his expression was raw. If I lose the title, I lose everything. The estates, the money, the ability to support you, your family, everything I promised you. You'll be married to no one. A duchess without a dukedom. I'll be married to you. That's not nothing, isn't it? He laughed bitterly. You married a duke, Lydia, not whatever I'll be if Edmund wins. I married Rowan Ashford. The title was just part of the package. That's a lie, and we both know it. She wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd married the Duke of Ashford because her family needed the money and security that title represented. Without it, what did they have? What did any of this mean? I should let you go, Rowan said suddenly. Dissolve the marriage. Free you to find someone better. Stop it. I mean it. You could... Stop it. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. We made a bargain, and I don't break my word. Whether you're a duke or a pauper, I'm your wife. That's not changing. Why? The question came out almost broken. Why would you stay? Because somewhere in the past months, in the battles and truces and quiet moments, she'd started to care about him. Not as a duke or a benefactor, but as a person, complicated and damaged and trying his best despite everything. But she couldn't say that, not when everything was so uncertain. Because I said I would, she answered instead. That's enough. They stood there in the dying light, London spreading out below them, and Lydia felt the weight of everything they were about to lose pressing down like a physical force. 4 weeks until the hearing. 4 weeks to save everything. The next days were a blur of legal preparation. Rowan spent every waking hour with his solicitors, reviewing documents, preparing testimony, trying to find holes in Edmund's evidence. Lydia barely saw him, but she wasn't idle. She'd learned something important in her weeks at Ashford Hall. Information was power, and she knew how to get it. She started with the servants. "Tell me about Edmund," she said to Mrs. Winters, the London housekeeper who'd worked for Rowan's family for decades. "What's he like?" The woman looked uncomfortable. "I shouldn't speak ill of family, Your Grace. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to help me protect my husband." That changed things. Mrs. Winters leaned closer, voice dropping. "He's ambitious, always has been. Used to visit when His Grace was young, always asking about the inheritance, the estates. Made His Grace's father nervous." "Why?" "Because Edmund acted like the title was already his, like he was just waiting for the current duke to get out of the way." Lydia filed that away. "Who else might know something useful?" Mrs. Winters hesitated. "There's a woman, Iris Thornby. She was a maid here years ago when His Grace's grandfather was still alive. She might remember things about that first marriage Edmund's going on about." "Where can I find her?" 2 days later, Lydia sat in a cramped tea shop in Southwark across from a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and sharper memory. "I remember the old Duke's first wife," Iris said, stirring her tea methodically. "Scottish girl, very young. There was talk about whether the marriage was legal, some question about Scottish law versus English law, but she died in childbirth, her and the baby both. Tragic." "Edmund's witness claims to be that baby," Lydia said. "Grown up." "Then she's a liar." Iris set down her spoon with a decisive click. "I was there when that girl died. I helped lay out the body. There was no surviving baby. The midwife said it was born dead." "Would you testify to that?" "In court?" Iris looked frightened. "I'm just an old woman, Your Grace. Who'd believe me over some fancy witness Edmund's found?" "I would. Rowan would." Lydia leaned forward. "Please, we need you." The old woman studied her. "You love him, don't you? The young Duke?" The question caught Lydia off guard. Did she? She didn't know. She cared about him, yes. Wanted to protect him, definitely. But love? "I'm trying to," she said honestly. "And he needs help." Iris nodded slowly. "All right, I'll testify, but I want it known. I'm doing this for his grandfather, who was a good man. Not for titles or money or any of that. For him." "Thank you." Lydia squeezed the woman's hand. "Thank you." When she got back to the townhouse, Rowan was in his study with Fitzwilliam. She knocked, entered without waiting for permission. "I found something," she said. Both men looked up, startled. "Lydia, we're in the middle of—" "I found a witness who can discredit Edmund's claim." She explained about Iris, about the testimony, about the dead baby that couldn't possibly be Edmund's star witness. Fitzwilliam's eyes lit up. "This is good. Very good. If we can prove the witness is lying about her identity, the whole case falls apart." "Can you bring this woman in?" Rowan asked. "Get her testimony official?" "I can have her here tomorrow," Lydia said. For the first time in days, hope flickered in Rowan's expression. Where did you even find her?" "I asked questions, listened to gossip, used the network you didn't think I had." She smiled slightly. "Turns out being underestimated is useful." Something shifted in the way he looked at her, respect mixing with surprise and something warmer. "Thank you. We're on the same side, remember?" That night, for the first time since they'd arrived in London, Rowan knocked on her bedroom door. "Come in," she called, surprised. He entered, still dressed for the day, looking exhausted but less defeated than he had in weeks. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. "Properly. What you did today, finding that witness, you may have saved everything. We don't know that yet. But it's hope, real hope, and I have you to thank for it." He crossed to where she sat by the fire. "I underestimated you. I'm sorry. You're not the first, won't be the last." He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" The compliment made her flush. "I'm practical." "You're both." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so unexpected and gentle that it stole her breath. "I don't deserve you." Probably not, she agreed, trying to keep her voice light, even though her heart was hammering. But you're stuck with me anyway. I'm starting to think that might not be such a bad thing. They were close now, closer than they'd been since that awkward wedding kiss. Lydia could see the gray flecks in his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his gaze dropped to her mouth for just a second before returning to her eyes. Rowan, she started, not sure what she was going to say. The door burst open. Fitzwilliam stood there, breathless, holding a telegram. Your Grace, I apologize for the intrusion, but he stopped, seeming to realize he'd interrupted something. This just arrived, from Edmund's solicitor. Rowan took the telegram, read it, and his expression went dark. What is it? Lydia asked. He's challenging your testimony, Rowan said to her. Edmund's team found out about Iris somehow. They're filing a motion to exclude her from testifying, claiming we're using coercion and fraud to manufacture evidence. That's insane. She came forward willingly. Doesn't matter. They're arguing that the hearing should proceed with the evidence already submitted. If the judge agrees, Rowan crumpled the telegram. We're back where we started. When's the hearing on the motion? Fitzwilliam asked. Rowan looked at the telegram again. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Less than 12 hours. They had less than 12 hours to save everything. The courtroom was smaller than Lydia expected, wood-paneled and austere, the kind of place where fates were decided in whispers and legal precedents. She sat behind Rowan and his legal team, hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. Across the aisle, Edmund sat with his own solicitors. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35, handsome in a polished way, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he saw her looking, he nodded, polite, mocking. She hated him instantly. The judge entered, an elderly man with the kind of face that had forgotten how to show emotion. Everyone stood, sat again on command, and the hearing began. Edmund's solicitor presented their motion first. He was good, making Iris sound like a paid liar, Lydia like a manipulative duchess, using her position to manufacture testimony, the whole thing like a desperate fraud. The defense is clearly scrambling, the solicitor said smoothly. First, they produced no counter-evidence for months. Then, days before the expedited hearing, they suddenly find a witness, a woman of dubious credibility who claims to remember events from 50 years ago with perfect clarity. It strains belief, Your Honor. Fitzwilliam stood to counter. Mrs. Thornby's testimony is neither dubious nor fraudulent. She was present at the birth in question and can provide first-hand testimony purchased by a desperate duke and his calculating wife, Edmund's solicitor interrupted. We move to exclude it entirely. The judge tapped his gavel once. I'll hear from the witness herself. Bring in Mrs. Thornby. Iris entered, looking terrified but determined. She swore her oath, settled into the witness box, and told her story exactly as she had in the tea shop. I was there, she said firmly, when Edmund's solicitor tried to shake her. I saw that baby born dead. I held it. There was no survivor. And yet, 50 years later, you remember this with perfect clarity? I remember because it was heartbreaking. That poor girl, that poor baby. You don't forget things like that. Or perhaps you've convinced yourself you remember because the Duchess paid you. Nobody paid me nothing, Iris's voice rose indignant. I came forward because I couldn't stand by and watch a liar claim to be something she ain't. The judge raised a hand. That's enough. I'll take this under advisement and issue a ruling before the main hearing. When will that be, Your Honor? Fitzwilliam asked. 2 days? The judge stood. Court adjourned. 2 days. They had 2 more days of not knowing, 2 more days of waiting, 2 more days of everything hanging in the balance. Outside the courthouse, Rowan looked like he might collapse. He could rule against us, he said. Exclude Iris entirely. Then we'd have nothing. Or he could rule in our favor, Lydia countered. We don't know yet. Edmund looked confident. Edmund's a pompous ass who's used to getting his way. She took Rowan's arm. Come on, let's go home. This isn't home. Home is Ashford Hall, and if we lose, we haven't lost yet. But the fear in his eyes said he'd already started preparing for the worst. That night, Lydia couldn't sleep again. She wandered the townhouse, restless and anxious, until she found herself outside Rowan's door. She could see light under it. He was awake too. She knocked softly. Come in." He was sitting by the fire, still fully dressed, staring into the flames like they held answers. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Edmund sitting in my study at Ashford Hall, taking my father's seat, erasing everything I've worked for." He looked up at her. "I'm terrified, Lydia." She crossed to him, knelt beside his chair. "I know. If we lose, if the judge rules against us, I don't know what I'll do, who I'll be. You'll be Rowan, my husband, a good man who fought for what he believed in." She took his hand. "And we'll figure out the rest together." He pulled her up into his lap, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. She went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling his heart hammer against hers. "I don't want to lose you," he said into her hair. "If the title goes, if the money goes, if everything goes, I don't want to lose you." "You won't. Promise me." "I promise." He pulled back to look at her, and the raw emotion in his face made her ache. Then he was kissing her, not the cold formality of their wedding, but something desperate and real, like he was trying to memorize her, hold on to her before everything fell apart. She kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, all her fear and hope, and the growing feelings she didn't have words for yet. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever happens," he said, "thank you for fighting with me, for staying, for—" his voice cracked, "for seeing me." "Always," she whispered. They stayed like that, tangled together in front of the dying fire, while outside London slept, and somewhere Edmund plotted, and in 2 days a judge would decide if they got to keep fighting or if everything they'd built would crumble to ash. But for now, they had each other. It would have to be enough. The morning light found them still tangled together in the chair, Rowan's coat draped over both of them like a makeshift blanket. Lydia woke first, her neck stiff from the awkward angle, and for a moment just watched him sleep. His face was softer like this, younger, less burdened by the weight he carried constantly. Then his eyes opened, gray and clear, and he looked at her like he was afraid she might disappear. "Still here," she said softly. "Still here," he echoed, relief evident in his voice. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Fitzwilliam's voice came through, apologetic but urgent. "Your Grace, I have news." Rowan was on his feet instantly, Lydia scrambling up after him. He opened the door to find his solicitor holding another telegram, his expression unreadable. "The judge issued his preliminary ruling," Fitzwilliam said. "He's allowing Mrs. Thornby's testimony." The relief was so sudden and overwhelming that Lydia's knees went weak. Rowan caught her elbow, steadying her even as his own hand shook. "He believed her?" Rowan asked. More importantly, he found Edmund's motion to exclude her premature and prejudicial. He's warning both sides that the main hearing will be decided on evidence, not procedural games. Fitzwilliam allowed himself a small smile. "It's good news, Your Grace. Very good news." But Rowan's expression remained guarded. "When's the main hearing?" "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. And, Your Grace," Fitzwilliam hesitated, "Edmund's team has requested you both be present. Not just you, but the Duchess as well." "Why?" Lydia asked. "They're arguing that the marriage itself is relevant to the case, that it demonstrates forgive me, Your Grace, your pattern of expedient arrangements to shore up your claim to the title." Rowan's jaw went tight. "They're going to attack Lydia, use our marriage against us." "Almost certainly. I wanted you prepared." When Fitzwilliam left, Rowan turned to Lydia. "You don't have to go, I'm going." She cut him off. "If Edmund wants to drag our marriage into this, fine. Let him. I'm not hiding. They'll tear you apart, make you look like what I am, a girl who married for money." She shrugged. "I've already confessed that to half of polite society. Edmund's lawyers can't humiliate me worse than I've humiliated myself." "Lydia, I'm going, Rowan. We're in this together." She took his hand. "Whatever they throw at us, we face it together." He looked at their joined hands, then back at her face, and something fierce and grateful flickered in his expression. "All right, together." The rest of that day was spent in preparation. Fitzwilliam drilled them on potential questions. coach them on how to respond, warn them about every trap Edmund's lawyers might set. By evening, Lydia's head was spinning with legal terminology and carefully worded answers. "You need to rest," Rowan said when Fitzwilliam finally left. "Tomorrow's going to be brutal." "So do you." But neither of them could. They ended up in the library, Lydia curled in a chair, with a book she wasn't reading while Rowan paced like a caged animal. "Tell me something," she said finally. "Something that has nothing to do with Edmund or courts or any of this." He stopped pacing, looked at her. "Like what?" "I don't know. Your favorite memory. Something that makes you happy." He considered that, then crossed to sit in the chair opposite hers. "When I was 8, my father took me fishing. Just the two of us, up on the River Coquet near Ashford Hall. We didn't catch anything, and it rained the entire time, but—" He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "We laughed. I remember my father laughing, which he didn't do often, and I felt like maybe things would be all right, like I had a place in the world. That's a good memory. What about you? What's yours?" Lydia thought back to the days before everything fell apart. "My sisters and I used to put on plays, terrible, dramatic things we'd write ourselves. Charlotte always wanted to be the heroine, Emma insisted on being the villain because she got better lines, and I'd end up being everyone else. We'd make my mother and father watch, and they'd applaud like we were performing at Covent Garden." She laughed softly. "We were awful, but we were happy. When did you last see them, your sisters?" "The wedding, 2 months ago. It felt like years. I write them every week, but it's not the same." "Bring them here," Rowan said suddenly. "After the hearing, whatever happens, bring them to London. Let them visit." "Really?" "Really, they're your family. You shouldn't be separated." He paused. "And I'd like to meet them properly. Not just at a wedding breakfast where everyone was miserable." The offer warmed something in her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If Edmund wins tomorrow, I won't be able to afford to host anyone." "Then we'll make do. Charlotte's resourceful, and Emma can charm anyone. We'll survive." "You really believe that, don't you? That we'll be fine no matter what?" "I have to," Lydia said simply. "The alternative is despair, and I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." He stood, crossed to her chair, and pulled her to her feet. For a moment they just stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I'm glad I married you," he said quietly. "I know that's not romantic or eloquent, but it's true. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad it's you beside me." "I'm glad too," she whispered. This time when he kissed her, it was slower, gentler. Not desperation, but something that might eventually become love, given time and care and hope. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "We should sleep. Tomorrow we fight," she finished. "Together." The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the expedited hearing, and it seemed half of London's elite had turned out to watch the spectacle. A duke fighting for his title against his ambitious cousin with a controversial marriage thrown in for drama. Lydia sat in the front row behind Rowan and his legal team, acutely aware of every eye on her. She dressed carefully in deep blue, not quite as bold as red, but not the pale, apologetic colors people might expect. If Edmund's lawyers were going to attack her, she'd meet them head-on. Edmund sat across the aisle with his team of expensive solicitors. His wife was beside him, a proper aristocratic woman with perfect posture and a smug expression. She looked at Lydia with undisguised contempt. Lydia stared back until the woman looked away. The judge entered, everyone stood, and the hearing began. Edmund's lead counsel started immediately on the offensive. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about legitimacy, not just of title, but of character. My client has presented compelling evidence that the current Duke of Ashford's claim is legally dubious at best. But beyond the technicalities of inheritance law, we must consider what kind of man should hold such a prestigious title." Fitzwilliam started to object, but the judge waved him down. "I'll hear it. Continue." "The defendant has, in the span of mere months, contracted a highly irregular marriage to a woman of questionable background." "Objection!" Fitzwilliam was on his feet. "Mrs. Ashford's background is irrelevant to It's entirely relevant," Edmund's counsel shot back. "It demonstrates a pattern of expedient decision-making, of prioritizing appearance over substance. The defendant needed to look stable, so he purchased a wife. He needed to look established, so he imported instant respectability. These are not the actions of a man fit to hold one of England's oldest titles. The words struck like physical blows. Lydia felt herself flush, felt the weight of every stare in the courtroom. Rowan's hand found hers under the table, squeezed tight. Furthermore, Edmund's counsel continued, warming to his theme, we have testimony that the marriage itself was transactional in nature. The bride's father was facing financial ruin. The defendant paid his debts in exchange for his daughter. This is not a marriage, Your Honor. It's a business arrangement designed to create the appearance of domestic stability before this very hearing. The judge looked at Rowan. Is this true, Your Grace? Was the marriage transactional? Rowan stood slowly. Lydia's heart hammered. Yes, Your Honor, he said clearly. The marriage was arranged to mutual benefit. Miss Harrow's family needed financial assistance. I needed a wife. We came to an agreement. Murmurs erupted through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. However, Rowan continued, his voice carrying over the noise, the circumstances of our marriage have no bearing on my legitimacy as Duke. The title passes through blood, not romance. My grandfather's marriage was legal. My father's birth was legitimate. I am the rightful Duke of Ashford, regardless of how or why I chose to marry. But it speaks to character, Edmund's counsel started. Then let's talk about character, Rowan interrupted, his voice going hard. My cousin Edmund has spent 3 years and a fortune trying to steal a title he has no right to. He's manufactured witnesses, twisted law, and dragged my family's private affairs through public courts for no reason except greed. If we're judging character, let's judge his. Your Grace, the judge warned. I'm not finished. Rowan's eyes blazed. Edmund claims he wants this title because it's rightfully his. But the truth is, he wants it because he spent his entire life being second best. Second son of a second son, watching me inherit what he thought should be his. This isn't about law or legitimacy. It's about envy. That's a lie. Edmund was on his feet now, red-faced. I have every right. You have nothing, Rowan shot back. Nothing except ambition and a good solicitor, and it's not enough. The judge's gavel came down like thunder. Both of you, sit down, now! They sat. The courtroom buzzed with excited whispers. This was better than theater. We will proceed with evidence, the judge said coldly. Counsel, present your case, and I will tolerate no more outbursts from anyone. Edmund's team went first, laying out their argument methodically. The questionable marriage of Rowan's grandfather, the possibility of illegitimacy, the new witness who claimed to be the surviving child. Then it was Fitzwilliam's turn to dismantle it all. Your Honor, we call Mrs. Iris Thornby to the stand. The old woman entered, looking terrified but determined. She settled into the witness box, swore her oath, and began her testimony. I was there when the first Duchess died, she said firmly. I was 20 years old, working as a chambermaid at Ashford Hall. The birth was difficult. The baby, a boy, was born dead. The mother died a few hours later. I helped prepare both bodies for burial. And you're certain the baby didn't survive? Fitzwilliam asked. Certain as I'm sitting here. There was no breath in that child. The midwife tried everything, but it was gone before it ever lived. Edmund's counsel stood for cross-examination, but Iris held firm to every question, every attempt to shake her story. She'd been there. She'd seen it. She knew the truth. When she finished, the judge looked to Edmund's team. You have a witness claiming to be this deceased child. I'd like to hear from her. Edmund's counsel looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, our witness has unfortunately taken ill and is unable to appear. How convenient, Fitzwilliam murmured. But we have her sworn testimony on record. Which is worthless if she can't be cross-examined, the judge said flatly. Do you have any other evidence supporting your claim that the current Duke's grandfather was illegitimately married? We have documents suggesting irregularities in the marriage contract. Suggestions aren't evidence. Documents that suggest aren't proof. The judge shuffled his papers. Is there anything concrete you can present? Edmund's counsel conferred with his team in hurried whispers. Finally, we need time to locate additional witnesses, Your Honor. You've had 3 years, the judge said. How much more time do you need? A continuance of denied. The judge's voice was final. You've presented a case built on a witness who can't appear and documents that prove nothing. Meanwhile, the defense has provided credible testimony directly contradicting your central claim. I see no reason to continue wasting the court's time. Lydia's heart leaped. Beside her, Rowan had gone very still. However, the judge continued, I will take this matter under advisement and issue a final ruling within the week. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. For a moment, no one moved. Then the courtroom erupted. Conversations, arguments, the scrape of chairs as people rushed to spread gossip. Rowan turned to Lydia, his expression carefully neutral, but she could see the hope warring with fear in his eyes. We wait, Fitzwilliam said quietly. But I think we may have won. Outside the courthouse, they were immediately surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers, all shouting questions. Rowan pushed through them, keeping Lydia close until they reached their carriage. Only when they were safely inside, the door closed and the carriage moving, did he let himself react. We might actually win this, he said, his voice shaking slightly. The judge, did you hear him? He all but dismissed Edmund's case. Don't celebrate yet, Lydia warned, even though her own heart was racing. A week is a long time. Anything could happen. Always the optimist. One of us has to be realistic. But she was smiling. She couldn't help it. Rowan pulled her close suddenly, kissing her hard and desperate, and she kissed back with all the fear and hope and relief coursing through her. Whatever happens, he said when they broke apart, thank you for standing with me, for being brave when I couldn't be. You were plenty brave. You stood up to Edmund in open court. I was terrified. So was I. But we did it anyway. She touched his face. That's what brave is. The carriage took them back to the townhouse, where they found a surprise waiting. Charlotte and Emma, sitting in the drawing room with Mrs. Winters fussing over them. Lydia! Emma launched herself at her sister. We came as soon as we heard about the hearing. Mother said we shouldn't, but Charlotte said you might need us, so we took the mail coach and— Emma, let her breathe, Charlotte said, but she was grinning as she hugged Lydia too. We wanted to be here, to support you. Lydia looked over their heads at Rowan, who was watching the reunion with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your Grace, Charlotte said, curtsying to him. Thank you for allowing us to— Don't, Rowan interrupted gently. Don't your Grace the me, your family. Call me Rowan. Both girls' eyes went wide. Really? Emma asked. Really? He smiled, and it was the most genuine smile Lydia had seen from him. You're welcome here any time, both of you. That night, they had dinner together, the four of them, and for the first time since the wedding, Lydia felt something like happiness. Her sisters charmed Rowan, drawing out stories about Ashford Hall and making him laugh with their impressions of London society. Emma declared the townhouse acceptably grand, and Charlotte grilled him about the estate's library with the intensity of a scholar. She wants to be a writer, Lydia explained when Charlotte launched into a passionate defense of Gothic novels. Then she should see Ashford Hall's library, Rowan said. 6,000 volumes, some dating back centuries. You're welcome to explore it when you visit. Charlotte's face lit up. When we visit? Of course. The hall's your sister's home now. That makes it yours too, when you want it. After dinner, Lydia walked her sisters to their room. Mrs. Winters had prepared the guest quarters with remarkable efficiency. He's not what I expected, Charlotte said quietly. From your letters, I thought he'd be, colder. He is cold, Lydia said. But he's also— She searched for the right word. Trying. We both are. Do you love him? Emma asked bluntly. Did she? The question had been circling her mind for weeks now. She cared about him, certainly. Wanted to protect him, support him, be beside him. But love? I think I might, she admitted. Eventually, if we have time. You'll have time, Charlotte said firmly. You'll win the case, keep the title, and live happily ever after at that grand estate with the 6,000 books. Life isn't a novel, Charlotte. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean it can't have a happy ending. The week that followed was the longest of Lydia's life. Each day crawled past with no word from the court. Rowan grew increasingly tense, snapping at servants and pacing the townhouse like a trapped animal. Her sisters did their best to keep spirits up, but even Emma's relentless optimism began to flag. On the fourth day, a letter arrived from her father. Short, anxious, asking if the case was resolved, if they were safe, if the debts would remain settled. "He's scared," Lydia said, showing it to Rowan. "If you lose the title, if Edmund contests the debt settlement—" "I'll protect them," Rowan said immediately. "Whatever happens, I'll make sure your family is taken care of. I swear it." "With what? If Edmund takes everything, then I'll find a way. I'll work, sell whatever I'm allowed to keep, do whatever it takes. Your family won't suffer because of this. I promise." The certainty in his voice made her believe him. On the sixth day, when Lydia was beginning to think the judge had forgotten them entirely, a messenger arrived with a summons. They were to appear in court the next morning for the final ruling. That night, none of them slept. Rowan, Lydia, Charlotte, and Emma sat together in the library, keeping vigil like soldiers before battle. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Charlotte said, "we're proud of you, both of you." "We haven't won yet," Rowan said. "Doesn't matter. You fought. That's what counts." But it did matter. It mattered desperately. The courtroom the next morning was even more packed than before. Everyone wanted to see the finale of the drama that had captivated London society. Lydia wore the red dress again, a deliberate choice. If this was the end, she'd meet it boldly. Charlotte and Emma sat behind her, both dressed in their best gowns, their presence a quiet support. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Sat. "I have reached a decision in the matter of Edmund Ashford versus Rowan Ashford, Duke of Ashford, regarding the legitimacy of the ducal title." The silence was absolute. Lydia couldn't breathe. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony presented, I find that the plaintiff has failed to substantiate his claim. The witness he produced cannot be cross-examined and is therefore inadmissible. The documents suggesting irregularities in the marriage contract are insufficient to override the presumption of legitimacy that has stood for 2 generations. Furthermore, Mrs. Thornby's testimony directly contradicts the plaintiff's central claim regarding a surviving child from the first marriage." Edmund's face was turning purple. His lawyers looked sick. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I rule in favor of the defendant. Rowan Ashford's claim to the title of Duke of Ashford is legitimate and shall remain unchallenged. The plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice, and he is barred from bringing future suits on this matter without substantial new evidence." The gavel came down. They'd won. For a moment, Lydia couldn't process it. Then Rowan turned to her, his face a mixture of shock and overwhelming relief, and she threw her arms around him, not caring who was watching. "We won," she whispered. "Rowan, we won." His arms tightened around her. "We did. Together." Behind them, Charlotte and Emma were crying and hugging each other. Around them, the courtroom erupted in noise. Some celebrating, some outraged. Edmund shouting something that got lost in the chaos. Fitzwilliam was grinning like a fool. "Congratulations, Your Grace." "Your Graces. The title is secure." They made their way out of the courthouse through a crowd of reporters and onlookers. This time, Rowan didn't push through silently. He stopped, pulled Lydia close, and addressed them all. "My wife and I are grateful for the court's decision," he said clearly. "Justice has been served. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're going home." Home. Ashford Hall, their home. The carriage ride back to the townhouse was jubilant. Charlotte and Emma peppered them with questions, dissecting every moment of the ruling, celebrating like they'd won a war. Maybe they had. At the townhouse, Mrs. Winters had already heard the news and prepared a celebration, champagne and a hastily assembled feast. The staff were all smiles, congratulating them with genuine warmth. "To the Duke and Duchess of Ashford," Fitzwilliam toasted, "may their reign be long and prosperous." They drank, they laughed, they celebrated until late into the night. Finally, when Charlotte and Emma had gone to bed and the servants had retired, Lydia and Rowan found themselves alone in the library. "I can't quite believe it's over," Rowan said, staring at the fire. 3 years of fighting, and it's just over." "Are you disappointed?" Lydia teased. "Did you enjoy the constant anxiety?" "Immensely." He pulled her down to sit beside him. "What do we do now?" "Whatever we want. Go back to Ashford Hall, host dinners, scandalize society, live our lives. Together? Together, she confirmed. He turned to face her, suddenly serious. I meant what I said in court, about the marriage being transactional. But Lydia, it's not anymore. At least not for me. Somewhere along the way, it became real. Her breath caught. Real? I care about you more than I thought possible, more than I wanted to, honestly. He laughed softly. You terrify me. The idea of losing you terrifies me more than losing the title ever did. You're not going to lose me. Promise? I promise. She kissed him, soft and sure. I'm not going anywhere, Rowan. We made a bargain, remember? And I keep my word. This is more than a bargain now. I know. She smiled. It's better. They sat together in the firelight, battle-scarred and victorious. Two people who'd started as strangers and become something infinitely more complicated and valuable. The next morning, they received an unexpected visitor. Lady Pembroke herself arrived without warning and demanding an audience. Lydia expected another confrontation, more cutting remarks about her unsuitable marriage. Instead, the older woman looked almost contrite. I came to apologize, Lady Pembroke said stiffly. I underestimated you, Your Grace, both of you. What you accomplished in that courtroom, standing together against Edmund's challenge, it was admirable. Lydia nearly dropped her teacup. I'm sorry? You heard me. I was wrong about you, about your marriage. She set down her own cup. I've been thinking about what you said at my ball, about honesty. You were right. Half the marriages in our circle are built on lies and appearances. At least yours has truth to it. That's unexpectedly kind of you to say. Don't get used to it. I'm still not convinced you're entirely suitable. But there was a hint of warmth in her eyes now. However, I'm willing to reconsider my position. Perhaps you'll join me for tea next week. Just the two of us. I'd like to get to know the woman who had the audacity to stand up to me. I'd like that, Lydia said, surprising herself by meaning it. After Lady Pembroke left, Rowan appeared in the doorway. Was that who I think it was? Lady Pembroke, being almost nice. The world really has turned upside down. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. What do you say we get out of London, go back to Ashford Hall and just be? No more battles? No more performances? Just us? Our life, whatever that looks like. That sounds perfect. They left London 2 days later, Charlotte and Emma with them. The journey north felt different this time. Not an exile, but a homecoming. The girls chattered constantly, excited about seeing the hall properly, and even Rowan seemed lighter, younger, more at ease than Lydia had ever seen him. When Ashford Hall finally appeared on the horizon, gray stone rising from the moorland, Lydia felt something unexpected, joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. This was home now, really home. Mrs. Davison greeted them at the door, and if she was surprised to see the Duchess's sisters in tow, she hid it well. Welcome home, Your Grace, she said to Lydia, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. All of you. That night they had dinner in the great hall, all of them together, family and found family, celebrating survival and victory and the strange, unexpected bonds that had formed in fire. To new beginnings, Charlotte toasted. To happy endings, Emma added. To home, Rowan said, looking at Lydia. To us, Lydia finished, and they all drank. Later, when her sisters had gone to explore the library and the servants had retired, Lydia and Rowan walked through the gardens in the twilight. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of heather from the moors. Thank you, Rowan said quietly. For everything, for fighting beside me, for not giving up when you had every reason to, for... He stopped, turned to face her. For choosing me, even when I didn't deserve it. You did deserve it. You do deserve it. She took his hands. We both deserve this, whatever this is becoming. And what is it becoming? She thought about it. Something real, something good, something worth fighting for. I love you, he said, the words tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back anymore. I know it's too soon and I know I'm terrible at this, but I love you, Lydia. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I don't want to waste another day pretending otherwise. Tears pricked her eyes. You really are terrible at this. I know, I'm sorry, but I love you too. She laughed through the tears. You infuriating, complicated, wonderful man. I love you too. He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise, and she kissed back with everything she had. They'd started as strangers bound by necessity. They'd become allies forged in battle. And now, finally, they were becoming what they'd never expected. Partners in truth, bound not by contract but by choice. It wasn't the fairy tale ending Charlotte's novels promised. It was better. It was real. And it was theirs. The morning after their confession in the garden, Lydia woke to find Rowan already gone from their bed, his side still warm but empty. She found him in his study, staring at a letter with an expression she couldn't read. "What's wrong?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, and there was something vulnerable in his face. "My father's solicitor wrote, there are provisions in the estate I never knew about, things my father set aside before he died." He held out the letter, including a trust for future children. He was planning for grandchildren he'd never meet. Lydia crossed to him, read over his shoulder. The document outlined education funds, properties held in trust, provisions for multiple heirs. It was meticulous and heartbreaking, a father trying to care for a future he wouldn't see. "He loved you," she said quietly. "Even through the drinking, even through everything, he loved you. I spent so many years angry at him for giving up, for choosing the bottle over." Rowan's voice broke. "But maybe he was just as lost as I've been, just as scared." "You're not him, Rowan. You're not going to give up." "No." He pulled her close. "I have too much to fight for now." A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Davison entered, looking flustered in a way Lydia had never seen. "Your Graces, forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation. Your father, your Grace," she said to Lydia. "He's here, and he's collapsed." Lydia's world tilted. "What?" "He arrived a quarter-hour ago, demanding to see you. He made it as far as the entrance hall before he fell. The doctor's been sent for, but—" Mrs. Davison's expression was grave. "You should come." They found Thomas Harrow on a settee in the morning room, his face gray, his breathing labored. Margaret hovered beside him, wringing her hands, while Charlotte and Emma stood frozen in the doorway. "Father?" Lydia knelt beside him, took his hand. It was cold and clammy. "What happened?" "Lydia." His voice was barely a whisper. I had to see you. Make sure you were—" He coughed, a horrible rattling sound. "The debts. Edmund's people came. Said if the Duke lost, they'd call in everything. I thought we'd lost everything again." "Edmund had no right," Rowan said, his voice hard. "The debts were settled legally. Even if I'd lost the title, those contracts were separate. I didn't know. I panicked, tried to come here, and—" Thomas coughed again, worse this time. The doctor arrived then, shooing them out while he examined the patient. They waited in the corridor, Lydia pacing, her mother crying quietly, Charlotte comforting Emma, and Rowan standing perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Finally, the doctor emerged, his face grim. "His heart," he said bluntly. "The strain, the travel, the anxiety, it's all taken a toll. He needs complete rest. Weeks, possibly months. And even then," he shook his head, "I can't promise anything." "Can he be moved?" Margaret asked, her voice shaking. "Not safely, not for some time." Rowan stepped forward. "Then he stays here. All of you stay here, as long as necessary." Margaret looked at him with such gratitude that it was almost painful to witness. "Your Grace, we couldn't—" "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "Your husband needs care, and your daughters need their family together. Ashford Hall is large enough for all of us." That night, once Thomas was settled in a guest room with the nurse watching over him, Lydia found Rowan on the terrace, staring out at the dark moorland. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind, "for letting them stay, for everything. They're your family. Of course they stay." He turned in her arms. "How's your father?" "Sleeping. The doctor gave him something for the pain." She rested her head against his chest. "I'm scared, Rowan. What if—" "Don't. Not yet." He held her tighter. "We'll take it one day at a time." The days that followed settled into a strange new rhythm. Thomas remained bedridden, weak but stable. Margaret rarely left his side. Charlotte and Emma tried to help however they could, and the hall that had once felt too empty was suddenly full of life and noise and family. Lydia found herself torn between her father's sick room and her duties as Duchess, trying to manage both and feeling like she was failing at everything. "You're exhausted," Rowan said one evening, finding her asleep at her desk with household accounts scattered around her. "I'm fine," she lied, sitting up too quickly and making her head spin. "You're running yourself into the ground." He pulled her to her feet. "Mrs. Davison can handle the accounts. Your mother can sit with your father for a few hours. You need to rest." "I can't rest when everything's falling apart." "Nothing's falling apart. Your father is stable. The house is running smoothly. The only thing falling apart is you, and I won't allow it." "You won't allow it?" She would have laughed if she weren't so tired. "You don't get to I do, actually. Because I love you, and watching you destroy yourself helping everyone else is killing me." His voice softened. "Let me help. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? Carrying each other's burdens?" She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Instead, she let him guide her to their room, help her into bed, and hold her while she finally let herself cry. For her father, for the fear, for the exhaustion of trying to hold everything together. "I've got you," Rowan murmured into her hair. "Whatever happens, I've got you." A week later, Thomas was strong enough to sit up and take visitors. Lydia found him propped against pillows, looking frail but more alert than he had since the collapse. "How are you feeling?" she asked, taking the chair beside his bed. "Like an old fool who panicked over nothing," he managed a weak smile. The Duke explained about the debts, that they're settled regardless of the title dispute. "I should have trusted that. Should have trusted you." "You were scared. We all were." "Still," he took her hand. "I'm sorry, Lydia, for everything. For the bad investments that ruined us. For forcing you into a marriage you didn't want. For—" "Stop." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not going to lie and say I wanted this marriage at first. But, Father, it's become something more. Something good. You didn't ruin my life. You might have accidentally given me a better one." "You love him?" Thomas asked quietly. "I do, and he loves me. We're—" She searched for the right words. "We're building something real together." Her father's eyes filled with tears. "That's all I wanted. For you to be happy. To be safe." "I am, both." "Then maybe I didn't fail completely after all." That afternoon, Lydia was reviewing menus with Mrs. Davison when a commotion erupted in the entrance hall. Raised voices, the sound of someone arguing with the footman. She arrived to find Edmund standing in the doorway, disheveled and furious, trying to push past the staff. "You can't keep me out," he was shouting. "I have rights." "You have nothing," Rowan said, appearing at the top of the stairs. His voice was cold and final. "The court ruled against you. The title is mine. You have no business here." "I came to speak with you, to—" Edmund seemed to pull himself together with visible effort. "To apologize." The silence that followed was electric. "Apologize?" Rowan descended the stairs slowly. "For 3 years of legal battles? For trying to steal my inheritance? For harassing my wife's family? For all of it." Edmund looked genuinely miserable. "I was wrong. I knew it even as I was doing it, but I couldn't stop. The envy, the resentment, it ate at me until I convinced myself the title should be mine, that I deserved it more than you. And now? Now I've lost everything trying to take what wasn't mine. My wife left me. My children barely speak to me. I've spent a fortune I didn't have on solicitors and bribes and manufactured evidence." He laughed bitterly. "I destroyed myself chasing a title that was never going to be mine." Lydia watched from the landing, holding her breath. Rowan's expression was unreadable. "You should leave," Rowan said finally. "And if you ever come near my family again, my wife, her family, anyone connected to this estate, I will use every legal resource at my disposal to destroy you. Do you understand?" Edmund nodded, defeated. "I understand." He turned to go, then stopped. "For what it's worth, she's stronger than you know. Your Duchess. You chose better than you deserved." Then he was gone. Rowan stood in the entrance hall for a long moment, staring at the closed door. When he finally looked up and saw Lydia on the stairs, something in his expression made her heart ache. "Are you all right?" she asked, coming down to him. "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. "I spent 3 years hating him, building him up as this monster, and now he's just a sad man who made terrible choices." "Yes." Rowan pulled her close. "It's almost disappointing. I wanted him to be unforgivable. It's easier when enemies stay enemies." "Nothing about this has been easy," Lydia said. "Why start now?" He laughed, surprised and genuine, and kissed her forehead. "Why indeed?" The weeks passed, and Thomas slowly recovered. Color returned to his face, strength to his limbs. The doctor was cautiously optimistic, though he warned that Thomas would never be robust again. "You need to take care of yourself," Lydia lectured her father. "No more panicking over things you can't control. No more traveling when you should be resting." "Yes, Your Grace," Thomas said, a teasing note in his voice. "Whatever you say, Your Grace. I'm serious." "I know you are. And I'll try." He squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you're happy, Lydia. That's all that matters to me now." In late autumn, an invitation arrived that changed everything. Lady Pembroke was hosting her annual harvest ball and specifically requested the Duke and Duchess of Ashford's attendance. "We don't have to go," Rowan said, reading the invitation over breakfast. "After everything that happened at the last ball—" "We're going," Lydia interrupted firmly. "We won, Rowan. We fought every battle and won. I'm not hiding anymore." "You want to walk back into that room? Face all those people?" "I want to show them that we're still standing, still together, still unashamed." She took the invitation from him. "Besides, I have a new dress. It would be a shame to waste it." "Let me guess, red?" "Scarlet, actually. Completely inappropriate." She grinned. "Perfect." The night of the ball, Lydia stood in front of her mirror while Anne helped with the final touches. The dress was indeed scarlet, bold and unapologetic, with delicate beading that caught the light. She looked powerful. She looked like a duchess. She looked like herself. Rowan appeared in the doorway, resplendent in evening clothes, and stopped dead. "Is it too much?" Lydia asked, suddenly uncertain. "It's perfect. You're perfect." He crossed to her, took her hands. "I'm the luckiest man in England." "In the world," she corrected. "In the world," he agreed, and kissed her until Anne cleared her throat meaningfully. The journey to Pembroke Manor felt different this time. No dread, no anxiety, just anticipation. They were going to face society together, as equals, as partners, and Lydia wasn't afraid anymore. When they arrived, the ballroom was already packed. The moment they entered, conversation stuttered to a halt. Every eye turned to them. To the Duke, who'd defended his title in court. To the Duchess, who'd stood beside him wearing scandalous red. Lady Pembroke approached immediately, her expression unreadable. "Your Grace, Your Grace," she nodded to each of them. "I'm so glad you came." "Thank you for the invitation," Rowan said carefully. "I must confess, I had ulterior motives." Lady Pembroke gestured to the watching crowd. "I wanted everyone to see you together, to see what real partnership looks like. You've given us all something to aspire to." Lydia nearly dropped her fan. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me?" The older woman smiled, genuinely, for the first time since Lydia had known her. "You stood together through a scandal that would have destroyed most marriages. You fought for each other. You chose each other, again and again, even when it would have been easier to walk away. That's worth celebrating." She raised her voice, addressing the room. "I give you the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, partners in truth, tested by fire, and stronger for it." The applause that followed was thunderous. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes as people who'd once whispered about her now clapped and smiled. Lady Catherine approached, actually smiling. Mrs. Harrison curtsied respectfully. Even the women who'd been cruelest at that first tea party looked at her with something approaching respect. "Dance with me," Rowan said, offering his hand as the music began. They waltzed across the ballroom floor, and this time, Lydia didn't feel the weight of judgment, just the music, the moment, and the man she loved holding her close. "Look at us," she murmured. "We actually did it." "We did it," he agreed. though I'm still not sure how. We chose each other. Every day, through everything, we chose each other. That's how. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. People who'd once looked down on Lydia now sought her out, asking about Ashford Hall, complimenting her dress, treating her like she actually belonged. It was overwhelming and vindicating and a little surreal. As they were leaving, Lady Pembroke pulled Lydia aside. "I misjudged you," she said quietly. "I thought you were a social climber who'd married for money and nothing more. I was wrong. You're one of the strongest women I've met, and I'm glad to call you a friend." "A friend?" Lydia repeated, startled. "If you'll have me," Lady Pembroke smiled. "I could use friends who don't bore me to tears with gossip and false flattery. You, at least, are genuine." "Then yes, friends." On the carriage ride home, Lydia leaned against Rowan's shoulder, exhausted but happy. "That went better than I expected," he said. "That went better than I dared hope." She laced her fingers through his. "We really are going to be all right, aren't we?" "Better than all right. We're going to be extraordinary." Winter came to Ashford Hall, blanketing the moorland in snow and turning the estate into something out of a fairy tale. Thomas was strong enough to walk the grounds with assistance, and Margaret had stopped crying every time she looked at Lydia. Charlotte spent hours in the library, working on a novel she swore would be brilliant. Emma charmed the entire staff and half the village. The house that had once felt like a prison now felt like a home. On Christmas Eve, they gathered in the Great Hall, the whole family, including Mrs. Davison and several of the senior staff who'd become more like family than employees. A massive tree stood in the corner, decorated with candles and ribbons. A fire roared in the enormous hearth. "I want to make a toast," Rowan said, standing with his glass. "To family, both born and chosen. To second chances and new beginnings. To love that grows even in the darkest times. And to my extraordinary wife who turned a bargain into something I never knew I needed." "Hear, hear," Thomas said, his voice still weak but warm. "To Lydia," Charlotte added, "the bravest person I know." "To Rowan," Lydia countered, standing as well. "Who turned out to be so much more than a cold duke in a Gothic estate. Who fought beside me, trusted me, and somehow learned to love me despite everything. You gave me more than a title. You gave me a home. A real home." They drank, and Lydia felt the weight of the past year, all the fear and fighting and eventual triumph, settle into something like peace. Later, when everyone else had gone to bed, she and Rowan stood on the terrace watching snow fall across the moorland. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The bargain we made? What it cost you? Do you?" "Not for a second." He pulled her closer. "You're the best decision I ever made. Even though I wasn't what you ordered, even though I fought you on everything, especially because of that." He turned her to face him. "I thought I wanted something simple and uncomplicated, but what I needed was you, stubborn, brilliant, brave you. Someone who'd challenge me and stand beside me and refuse to let me hide." "I was terrified," she admitted. "That first night, signing the contract, I felt like I was signing away my life. And now? Now I feel like I signed up for the greatest adventure of my life. It's been hard and scary and nothing like what I imagined, but I wouldn't change it." Snow caught in her hair, and he brushed it away gently. "I love you, Lydia Ashford, more than I thought possible, more than I have words for." "I love you too, my cold duke who turned out to have the warmest heart." They kissed in the falling snow, two people who'd started as strangers and become everything to each other. Spring brought new changes. Thomas was well enough to travel back to the property Rowan had secured for him, though he and Margaret visited often. Charlotte's novel sold to a publisher, causing a scandal her sister would never live down. Emma announced her intention to open a school for girls who couldn't afford proper education, and Rowan immediately offered to fund it. And Lydia discovered she was pregnant. She told Rowan in the gardens, on the same spot where they'd first confessed their love months earlier. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice shaking. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a baby." He swept her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We're going to have a baby. Rowan, put me down before you drop me." He set her down gently, but kept his hands on her waist, his expression a mixture of joy and terror. I don't know how to be a father. Good thing you have 9 months to figure it out. She took his hands. We'll learn together, like everything else. Together, he agreed, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The pregnancy was hard. Lydia spent weeks sick and miserable, snapping at everyone and hating every minute. But Rowan was patient and attentive, bringing her tea she couldn't drink and reading to her when she couldn't sleep, and gradually the sickness passed. Summer found her round and ungainly, waddling through the hall and complaining about everything while Rowan tried not to laugh at her. I'm enormous, she announced one evening at dinner. You're beautiful, he countered. I'm a whale, an elegant Duchess whale. The most beautiful whale in England. She threw a roll at him. When the baby finally came on a crisp autumn evening, Lydia thought she might die from the pain. She screamed and swore, and at one point told Rowan she was going to murder him for doing this to her. He held her hand through it all, white-faced but steady. And then after hours of agony, a cry pierced the air, high and indignant and absolutely perfect. A boy, the midwife announced, placing the squalling bundle in Lydia's arms. A healthy baby boy. Lydia looked down at her son, red-faced and furious and beautiful, and felt her entire world realign. This tiny, perfect person was hers, theirs. Hello, she whispered. We've been waiting for you. Rowan sat beside her, staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. He's perfect. He's screaming. He's perfect, Rowan repeated firmly. What should we name him? They discussed names for months without agreeing, but looking at her son now, Lydia knew. Thomas, she said, after my father. Thomas Edward Ashford. Thomas Edward, Rowan repeated, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant immediately gripped his finger. Hello, Thomas. I'm your father, and I promise to do better than mine did. I promise to stay and to love you and to never give up. Tears streamed down Lydia's face as she watched her husband make promises to their son. Promises she knew he'd keep, because Rowan Ashford was many things, but he was not a man who broke his word. The christening was held at the local church, with half the county in attendance. Lady Pembroke stood as godmother, having formed an unlikely friendship with Lydia over the past year. Lord Fitzwilliam, no longer just a solicitor, but a genuine friend, stood as godfather. Afterward, they hosted a celebration at Ashford Hall. The ballroom was packed with people who'd once whispered about Lydia's unsuitable marriage and now celebrated their growing family. Charlotte was there with her publisher, already working on a second novel. Emma was there with plans for her school, which would open next spring. Thomas and Margaret were there, holding their grandson with tears of joy. Look at this, Margaret said to Lydia, gesturing at the crowded room. Look at what you've built. We built it, Lydia corrected. All of us. Together. That night, after everyone had gone home and the baby was sleeping in the nursery, Lydia and Rowan stood on the terrace, the same terrace where they'd made so many important decisions, had so many crucial conversations. Do you remember the first time we stood here? Rowan asked. After the Pembroke ball, when you were crying and said there was no escape? I remember. I felt like I was drowning. And now? She looked back through the windows at Ashford Hall, at the house that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home, at the nursery where their son slept, at the rooms where her family visited, at the life they'd built from a desperate bargain. Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He pulled her close, and they stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the moorland stretch wild and beautiful before them. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For saying yes, for signing that contract, for being stubborn and brave and refusing to let me hide from you. He turned her to face him. For choosing me every day, even when I gave you every reason not to. You gave me reasons to stay too. You gave me a home, a family, a partnership I never knew I wanted. She touched his face. You gave me love. We gave each other love, he corrected. That's the miracle of it. We both showed up broken and desperate, and somehow we made each other whole. Not whole, Lydia said. We're still broken in places, still figuring things out. But we're figuring them out together. Together, she agreed. They kissed in the starlight, two people who'd started as a transaction and become a love story, messy and complicated and absolutely real. Years later, when people asked Lydia about her marriage, she never sugarcoated it. She told them the truth, that she'd married for money, that it had been a business arrangement, that she'd signed a contract without love or hope. But she also told them what happened after, how a cold bargain became warm partnership, how necessity became choice, how two strangers learned to see each other and eventually love what they saw. It wasn't a fairy tale, she'd say. It was harder than that, more painful, more real, but it was ours, and it was worth every battle. The Duke and Duchess of Ashford became legendary in their county, not for their title or wealth, but for the school Emma founded with their support, for Charlotte's novels that changed how people thought about women's stories, for the way they transformed Ashford Hall from an imposing fortress into a welcoming home. They became known for hosting holiday dinners where servants ate alongside nobility, for supporting tenant farmers through hard times, for treating everyone with the dignity Rowan had learned from Lydia and the strength Lydia had learned from Rowan. But most of all, they became known for loving each other, publicly, unapologetically, through good times and bad. When Thomas Edward grew old enough to ask how his parents met, they told him the truth about the contract, the desperation, the bargain that neither of them wanted. "So you didn't love each other?" the boy asked, confused. "Not at first," Lydia admitted. "But love isn't always instant. Sometimes it grows slowly, from respect and partnership and choosing each other again and again." "Your mother taught me that," Rowan added. "She taught me that love is a verb, not just a feeling. It's what you do, not just what you say. And your father taught me that love is also trust, letting someone see you at your worst and believing they'll stay anyway." Young Thomas considered this. "So it's a happy ending?" Lydia and Rowan looked at each other and smiled, the private smile of two people who'd fought through hell and come out stronger. "It's a happy middle," Lydia said. "The best stories don't really end. They just keep going, with new chapters and new adventures." "And we have many more ahead of us," Rowan added, pulling both his wife and son close. Because that was the truth of it. Their story hadn't ended when they won the court case, or when they fell in love, or when they had their first child. It continued in every choice they made to honor each other, in every battle they fought side by side, in every moment they chose partnership over pride. Their transaction had become a marriage. Their marriage had become love. Their love had become legacy. And that legacy, built on honesty and hard work and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other, would echo through generations of Ashfords to come, a reminder that the best things in life are often the ones we never planned for, the ones we fight for, the ones we choose, every single day.